Katie and I got married this month. For our honeymoon, we went on a cruise in the Bahamas. So I brought along Babysitters on Board, the super special book where the girls go to the Bahamas on a cruise. Here's the premise. Mr. Pike's work gave him a free family cruise, probably because they didn't know he has 8 kids. Christie's stepdad Watson must think there's a competition to see who can bring the most people on a cruise, because he takes his entire family and the Babysitters Club on the same cruise. Now we've got 21 characters, 8 different narrators, and $35,000 of debt. On the flight to Florida, Karen is impressed that her lunch comes with salt. Really? I'm impressed that they gave out free lunch on an airplane. Christie goes with Karen into the airplane's bathroom, which is kind of gross and totally unnecessary because 6-year-olds know how bathrooms work. Christie doesn't know how the bathroom works, though, and she has a hard time figuring out how to lock the door. This all happens in Chapter 1. We're not starting the book off on the right foot here. Christie is bossy, so she decides the girls must have Babysitters Club meetings every day, even though Marianne and Stacy are the only ones babysitting. Wait a minute, Stacy? She was kicked out of the series 2 books ago! How did she get back so quickly? Christie is sharing a room with Dawn and Claudia. Dawn and Christie immediately butt heads because Christie is a huge slob and Dawn is a neat freak who hates messes. Please note this book is the only time in the series where Dawn is a neat freak. In every other book, her house is a mess, and she complains about Marianne's tidiness. Continuity! For the entire book, Christie upsets Dawn by making messes, and Dawn upsets Christie by cleaning up. It's not very interesting, so Dawn trades up for a better storyline. She finds a vacation boyfriend named Parker. In Marianne's chapter, we learn that she won't be doing much babysitting in this book, because babysitting is boring. It's because the adults decided the 4 oldest kids are mature enough to be on their own. Well, gee, if only half the kids are being watched, why didn't they bring half the babysitters, Marianne meets a girl with big boobs. She is highly impressed, and she can't help but say, wow. This is not the first time that Marianne has ogled other women. There was that bikini scene in Book 8, and she did all of that bra talk in Book 10. Still, I think it's super awkward that Marianne is checking out other girls' chests. Fun fact, I read the Amazon Kindle version of this book, which comes with popular highlights. Do you know how many people highlighted the boobs section? 6. Apparently some Babysitters Club fans are perverts. The busty girl is Alex Carmody, and she's by herself because her parents were killed. Marianne is super impressed by Alex's sophistication, and the 2 girls bond over the fact that they have dead parents. Chapter 4 is narrated by Mallory, who does a weird cat smiley face near her signature for some reason. Mallory spies on a bunch of strangers because one time she read a spy book. She gets excited when she thinks she found a celebrity and a stowaway, but it eventually turns out she was wrong. Mallory's next chapter is Chapter 17. Do you know what happens in between her 2 chapters? Half of the book happens. That's the main problem with this book. The storylines are too spaced out. Do you like the story with Alex or Parker? Too bad! You have to wait another 60 pages before they appear again. Karen narrates Chapter 5. Christie sends Karen to get something from their room, but Karen is distracted. She ends up getting a full manicure and a drink. Surprisingly, Christie is perfectly fine with Karen wasting their parents' money without permission. She even takes a picture of the manicure, and it's one of several pictures that appear in this book. They all look like they were drawn by little kids, but that's probably on purpose. Claudia needs a storyline, so she gets a note from a secret admirer. He buys her fancy earrings, and he follows her around the entire day. Claudia doesn't know who it is, because every time she turns around, he dives out of sight, and as book number 2 taught us, Claudia thinks it's romantic when a boy hides and watches every single thing she does. Personally, I think it's creepy. Stacy meets a child named Mark Kubaki. Mark Kubaki has a heart condition, so he spends all of his time in a wheelchair. Stacy has diabetes, so she can sympathize with being chronically ill. Mark and Stacy become good friends. Christy meets her own cruise buddy, an old man named Rudy Staples. He's grumpy because his wife died recently. Christy tries to get him interested in dating her grandmother, and the two of them become friends. They have fun playing video games and shuffleboard together. When Christy goes back to her room, though, all of the beds have been made! The horror! Either Dawn is being neat again, or the cruise has room service! Christy goes directly to her mom and complains that she needs a new room because she cannot handle being with Dawn anymore. Christy, get a life. The final narrator of the book is Christy's older brother. Ha ha, just kidding. Christy's older brothers never appear anywhere in this book. Instead, the last narrator is Byron, one of the Pike triplets. The boys play pirate, and Byron finds an old paper, which could be a treasure map. Fun fact, Katie and I visited the Pirate Museum in Nassau on our honeymoon. We learned that pirates didn't make treasure maps. Like normal people, they didn't bury their money, they spent it. This has nothing at all to do with the book, I just thought that was interesting. Dawn spends more time with Parker, and they have a mini argument. Parker hates his new stepfamily, and he thinks remarriages should not be allowed. Dawn disagrees, and she secretly thinks that Parker is being rude and selfish. The very next page, she decides Parker is her boyfriend, and it's true love because he's cute. What? Dawn, that is not the right conclusion to make after a big, unresolved fight. When Claudia tries to find her secret admirer, she meets a boy named Timothy. Timothy is nice and he has gorgeous eyelashes, so Claudia starts to crush on him. Timothy tells Claudia that her secret admirer is a nice guy who's shy around girls. And yep, Timothy's the secret admirer. I can tell. The cruise ends and everyone goes to Disney World. This stops the Christy-Dawn feud because the girls are now in new hotel rooms. Sure, it was the room that caused the fight, not the fact that Christy is insufferable. Christy and Dawn celebrate their renewed friendship by turning on the TV and looking for R-rated movies. Fortunately for the Disney staff, they don't find any. The final third of the book is a huge advertisement for Disney World. Anne Martin spends a lot of time describing all the rides and attractions. I certainly hope she was well compensated for this. Clearly she hasn't been to Disney World herself because she thinks Main Street is more exciting than Space Mountain. Main Street! The place with no rides whatsoever, no way is that better than Space Mountain! Karen has another chapter. Her dialogue is stilted. Every sentence is short. It is not fun. I did not enjoy it. She sees characters. She likes Main Street. She loves Main Street. Main Street is fun. She rides the Haunted Mansion. It is scary. She likes ghosts. Claudia helps Dawn pick out an outfit for her all-day date with Parker. This outfit is horrible. All lavender. I wear khakis every day, and even I know that would be hideous. The date goes well until Dawn loses her special unicorn bracelet. Parker buys her a new one, and he kisses her on the cheek. Aw, how cute. Dawn's unicorn bracelet is found later by Byron, who is still looking for buried treasure. A random passerby tells Byron that his treasure map is a fake. It's really a copy machine diagram written in Dutch. I'm not sure how Byron confused it for a map, since those are completely different things. Mallory does more spying, and she discovers that Alex's parents aren't dead. In fact, her parents are minor celebrities. Marianne is so furious that she marches straight up to Alex and chews her out for lying. Alex follows her all around Disney World trying to apologize, and Marianne ignores her the entire time because she is getting a major power trip from criticizing the busty chick. Karen has another chapter. She lies and says it's her birthday so she can force everyone to sing to her. She loves all the attention. She's basically a selfish brat, and her spin-off series started the month after this book. I'm inspired to make a drinking game for Karen's narration. Take a shot every time she lies, draws attention to herself, or explains something obvious. You'll be drunk by the end of the book. And let's face it, that's probably the best way to read this book. Timothy! He talks to Claudia, and he's got a confession to make. He is her secret admirer. I called it! He also confesses that he is Alex's brother. The two of them lie all the time to get attention because they feel neglected by their famous parents. Claudia is fine with having a boyfriend who constantly lies, and Timothy kisses her after the fireworks show. Kindle tells me the kiss scene was highlighted by 6 people. But Dawn's kiss scene wasn't highlighted by anyone. Apparently Dawn is not interesting. Well, now that Claudia has Timothy, every girl in the series has had a vacation boyfriend, except for Christy, who doesn't get one until Super Special 15, 10 years from now. Poor Christy. She's almost as unpopular as Dawn. The book ends with a Babysitters Club meeting, of course. The girls decide to make a scrapbook of their vacation. Mr. Staples becomes Christy's new pen pal. Mark has successful heart surgery. And Dawn never hears from Parker again. The end. Post-book follow-up. The main problem with this book is the format. As I mentioned earlier, there is a 60 to 70 page gap in between each part of the storylines. Unless you're reading the entire book in one sitting, it's hard to remember what's going on. I, for one, confuse Claudia's vacation boyfriend with Dawn's vacation boyfriend, since they're basically the exact same person. The stories are pretty shallow, since none of them last more than 3 chapters. All the girls have to do is talk to someone once or twice, and bam! It's a lifelong friendship. Is there a problem somewhere? Bam! It's resolved. We don't have time for plot development. Let's spend another 15 pages talking about how great Disney World is, and how the lines are only 10 to 20 minutes long. Which is another thing that bugged me about this book. The lines in Disney World are not that short, especially since this is July before the invention of FastPass. Another problem with this book is how it switches narration every single chapter. It's a good idea, but it doesn't work well here, because all of the characters sound exactly the same. Like, everyone constantly makes parenthetical remarks. I don't like Karen's stilted dialogue, but at least she talks differently than the others. The storyline I disliked the most was the Christy-Dawn feud. Dawn magically becomes a neat freak for the sake of having a fight with Christy. It's a contrived excuse for introducing dramatic tension. My favorite storyline was the one with Mr. Staples because he and Christy have real chemistry together. It felt like they were setting up for a later book where Mr. Staples meets Christy's grandmother, but that never happened. Overall, this is a collection of unrelated short stories with a lot of Disney World advertisement thrown in. It might be longer than a normal book, but the normal books have better, more fleshed out stories. I didn't like this book, but I'd say it's just more boring than it is actually bad. It's not bad, and if you like, a bunch of little fun stories, then this is the book for you. I give Babysitters Club Super Special Number 1, Babysitters on Board, a 3 out of 10. Babysitters Super Special Number 2 is a book within a book within a book. It's kind of a weird framing device. Stacy's writing the book about the book the girls just wrote, and why can't they just write normally? Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review. Let me try this introduction again. Babysitter Summer Vacation is about the girls going to summer camp. Stacy wants all of her friends to write about their experiences at Camp Mohawk because she loves them and she wants a memento of their precious time together. Just kidding. This is revenge for all the times Christy made her write in the club notebook. How do you like it when someone else forces you to write pointless entries, Christy? Doesn't feel so good now, does it? Christy's chapter explains the entire summer camp thing is Dawn's fault. She got the idea of going to summer camp from her favorite movie, The Parent Trap. Her next favorite camp movie is Meatballs, which I've never seen myself, but it doesn't look like it's an appropriate movie for our middle school girls to be watching. Not unless they expect to dress up in bikinis and rip Logan's clothes off at camp. I'm sure Logan wouldn't complain. Annoyingly, the book keeps mentioning Meatballs and Parent Trap over and over again. I kept count. They are mentioned 13 times in this book. Okay, those movies take place in a summer camp. We get it. Please stop talking about them. The book begins with everyone arriving at camp and meeting the various campers. I think it would have been interesting if the girls were going to camp by themselves, but no! They're here as camp counselors in training. So they're taking 2 weeks off from babysitting to do 2 weeks of babysitting. Right. As you'd expect, half the kids in town have followed the babysitters to the camp. I mean, they have to. They wither up and die if they go 5 days without being babysat. Or is that what happens to plants if you don't water them? Either way, the parents in Stony Brook aren't going to risk it, so the kids go off to camp with all the girls. Claudia's kids love her to death, while Stacy's kids are sick and gross. One has pink eye, one has a cold, and how did their parents not notice this before putting their kids on the bus? Irresponsible parents. Stacy should be used to seeing sick kids with diseases, thanks to all of her diabetic hospital trips, but she reacts like she's never seen sick kids before. She gets super scared of becoming sick, as in, so scared she runs away and hides during the camp safety lecture. Her hiding spot? A patch of poison ivy. Not good, Stacy. Not good. Marianne is partnered with a bunch of older, cool girls. She feels shy and out of place with them until she remembers that she has the ultimate middle school trump card, a super hot boyfriend. She tells the girls that Logan is totally real and not made up. They're not convinced. Dawn's kids are all normal, except for Heather. Heather is a shy girl who likes to read instead of play with the other kids. Dawn treats book reading like a disease which must be cured at all costs. She vows to get Heather to stop reading books! Wow, way to alienate your entire book reading audience there, Dawn. I should note that Dawn is watching 11-year-olds. It would have been hilarious if she had to watch Mallory and Jessie the whole time. But no, Jessie gets assigned to the racist cabin. One girl makes fun of Mallory and Jessie for having matching wristbands like twins. Another girl says they don't look like twins because, you know. Mallory tries to tell off the racist girl, but she gets confused and goes on a tangent about the Bobbsey twins. Typical Mallory. As for Christy, she gets 2 storylines because she is the author's favorite character. Her first storyline is that she feels shy and insecure around the older, more sophisticated girls. Hey, wait a second, that's the same thing that happens with Marianne. Huh. Christy's second storyline is about Charlotte Johansson, the shy girl who doesn't want to play with the other kids. Hey, wait a second, that's the same thing that happens with Dawn! Christy! Get your own storyline, stop stealing everyone else's! Mallory gets her cabin mad at her when she wakes them up early by accident. Mallory and Jessie change clothes together, which prompts the racist girl to call them both Oreos. Mallory is confused as to how that racial slur applies to her, and after wondering for a bit, she decides to take it as a compliment. She brands herself and Jessie as the black and white Oreo twins. Some boys from the boys' camp show up. Claudia instantly falls in love with the Asian boy. He's so cute! She hopes he's Japanese like her. Sadly, she is so busy gushing over him that she forgets to pay attention when he introduces himself. So now she doesn't know his name or how to contact him. Meanwhile, I'm wondering what happened to Timothy, Claudia's vacation boyfriend from the last Super Special. Did he and Claudia break up or something? Does he not exist anymore? I think Claudia should stay away from romance if all of her boyfriends disappear without a trace. Marianne tries to prove Logan exists by writing him a super gushy love letter. She says she swoons over his aftershave, and she says she can't wait to kiss her love bunny again. If Marianne's father ever read this letter, she'd be grounded for a month. The other girls use this as an opportunity to pull a prank on Marianne. They convince her to sneak over to the boys' camp in the middle of the night, and they purposely tattle on her so she will get caught by the camp's owner. They also try to scare her with stories about murderers in the woods because, well, Marianne is dumb enough to fall for it. In the end, Marianne gets caught. She gets in major trouble for breaking camp rules. The mean girls then do a complete 180 and decide Marianne is cool now. First they humiliate her, try to ruin her life, and then they love her. Hey, why not? Logan narrates a chapter, and I get the sense that the author had no idea how to write for a teenage boy character. So his dialogue is a mixture of chimpanzee and Dawn minus constant California references. The boys at the camp tease Logan over Marianne's letter, so he gets revenge by starting a food fight. End scene. Stacy starts feeling sick, so she visits the camp nurse. She is diagnosed with severe poison ivy rash, bug bites, pink eye, impetigo, and the common cold. Needless to say, she gets quarantined to the infirmary after that. Christy continues to be shy around the other girls, even though she's normally the most confident member of the Babysitters Club. Continuity! She feels immature compared to them, since they're much bigger than she is, both in terms of height and bra size. Christy still doesn't wear a bra, by the way. The books keep mentioning this, and it's still super awkward to read about. The older girls take pity on Christy and give her a makeover for movie night. That's where the boys and girls get together and watch Meatballs. Claudia uses this event to bond with her new crush. He introduces himself as Will Yamakawa, and he spends most of his time talking about his dead grandmother. Claudia thinks he's wonderful. Dawn's main counselor is sent home in an emergency, and the replacement counselor has no idea what she's doing. She takes the girls on an overnight camping trip, and they immediately get lost. I'm not sure how they got lost, because they were following a marked trail. As soon as they stopped seeing trail markers, they should have realized they took a wrong turn and then backtracked immediately. But no! New counselor forces them to keep going along the unmarked trail for 6 hours, before giving up and saying, I have no idea where we are. Dawn is the most responsible babysitter, so everybody turns to her for help. Just kidding again. They turn to Heather for help. Heather read a book on wilderness survival once, so that makes her an expert. She sets up the camp for them, and nobody gets eaten by wolves, so I guess it's a success. Good job, Heather. Next day, new counselor leads them in circles for 8 hours until Heather steps in. Heather takes the map and takes everybody back home to camp. I'm glad she saved everyone, but if she could have done that all along, why did she wait 2 days before helping? It's like she secretly enjoyed watching everyone else make idiots out of themselves. There is a dance with the girl camp and the boy camp. The girls with Christy give her a makeover. Again. The girls with Marianne decide to pierce her ears. She's too afraid to tell them no, but she's even more afraid when a girl comes at her with a sharp needle. Fortunately, the girl stops at the last minute, and Marianne's ears are saved. Pretty much all the readers agree this chapter was horrifying. Logan gets a chapter at the dance, which means he narrates more chapters than Mallory does in this book. Ow, poor Mallory. The guys stop making fun of Logan when they see how hot his girlfriend is. Are we talking about the same Marianne here? There's a sweet moment when Marianne gets nervous and Logan helps calm her down. He also kisses her twice, which I think is their first kiss in this series. Did they kiss in an earlier book? I don't remember. Claudia's dance is full of tragic romance because she loves Will, but she'll never see him again because they live in different states. They have a very tearful goodbye with dramatic lines like,
I don't want us to end, but I think we're going to.
I wish I could hold you forever.
I wish time could stop right now.
For reference, this is only the second time they've talked to each other. Stacy comes back to her cabin just in time for Christmas. Yes, Christmas. It's a tradition in camp that one half of each cabin has to decorate for Christmas and give out presents. I've never heard of this tradition, but I'm sure the 6-year-old campers loved the idea of only half of them getting presents. Especially Karen. She loves not getting presents on Christmas. And no, we don't hear about any of the other cabins doing Christmas parties. Stacy's Christmas is the only one worth mentioning. In the second to last chapter, we return to the Jesse Mallory racism story. It's been 150 pages since we last heard from our junior babysitters. I guess nothing interesting happened to them in between the first day of camp and the last day of camp. Jessie and Mallory help the kids put on a play/dance for all of the parents. The moral of the play is that you shouldn't be racist, and when the mean girls see it, they realize they're awful people, and they apologize for being rude. In the end, Stacy explains that Claudia got Will's address. They write letters to each other all the time, but I'm still confident we'll never hear from him again in this series. Same with Dawn's pen pal Heather. As for Christy, getting 2 makeovers has convinced her to start wearing mascara to all of her baseball games so she can impress Bart. Ooh la la. The end. Post-book follow-up. This book introduces the second super special contest, a trivia contest. Ann Martin will visit your town and take 4 kids to dinner if they answer 4 true or false questions. I'm guessing the winner ended up being someone in Ann Martin's hometown. And the dinner conversation included an awkward moment where Ann explained she's being replaced by ghostwriters. The back of the book also says they've got new Babysitters Club calendars and day planners. I don't have to review those in this review series, do I? 'Cause they're not really books, and I don't think I can do a 10-minute video talking about calendars. Remember how Dawn on the Coast started every chapter with a postcard? I thought that was a lazy excuse to artificially inflate the book's page count. This book does the same thing, except every chapter starts with a 2-page postcard, and half of them have a blank page after the postcard. That comes to a total of 50 pages just for postcards and other letters. Ouch! Just think, everyone could have gotten an extra 5-page chapter in this book, but no, we got postcards instead. All pointless postcards. 2 things to know about the postcards. First, Claudia's letter to her grandmother Mimi is addressed Mrs. L. Yamamoto. I wonder what the L stands for. Second, Jessie's letter to her father is addressed Alex Ramsey. That's not his name. His son is John Jr., therefore his name is John. Continuity! As for the book itself, I think it was better than the previous super special. There was a lot more of an effort to make the various stories overlap, and having Logan as the guest narrator is a better idea than giving guest narration to Mallory's random younger brother. However, there were some problems with the every character gets 3 chapters format. Most obviously, Jessie and Mallory are forced to share chapters instead of both of them having 3. The way Dawn's story works out, she has a tiny second chapter and a bloated 3rd chapter. Claudia's story with Will doesn't show up until her 2nd chapter, making the first one kind of a waste. Same with Christy's first chapter, which was about the bus ride to camp and had little effect on her story. And of course, having a 70-page gap in between the various chapters can make it hard to remember what's going on. As for the storylines, Christy's was okay. It was repetitive to see her get 2 makeovers, and it would have been better for her to sacrifice 1 makeover for the sake of focusing on Scarlett Johansson. Claudio's story was also fine. I'm just not interested in the vacation boyfriends who I know will never be mentioned again. Stacy's story was not interesting. She got sick and that's it. You don't need 3 chapters for that. Dawn getting lost in the woods was neat, even if the only reason it happened is because new counselor is incredibly stupid. The Mary Ann stuff was interesting to read. I don't think it was a fleshed out storyline though. It was just Mary Ann dealing with some girls and it didn't have any real direction. The Jessie and Mallory racism story was awkward. It started off as a story where Jessie is embarrassed by her dorky friend, which I liked. That could have been interesting, but then it veered into racism territory, which is a plotline that was done better in previous books. So overall, I liked 2/3 of the storylines in this book, and the setting. That was a nice change of pace from Stony Brook. I don't know though. I think I'll stand by my original assertion that it would have been more interesting to see the girls go to camp themselves, instead of being CITs. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 2, Babysitter Summer Vacation, a 7 out of 10. I love my baby daughter, but I have a really hard time finding someone to watch her. Ring ring.
Hello, Babysitter's Club.
Hi, I need someone to watch Rosie so I can do a book review. What's your going rate for super specials?
Normally we charge double for super specials. And wait a minute, is this Arglefumph?
Yes.
I don't like your reviews. You keep making jokes about Han bossy and controlling. Yeah, you say all I do is complain about being 11.
That's why I didn't read this book earlier.
Arglefumph book review. Arglefumph book review.
The book begins with a letter from Marianne to Logan. She's writing to tell him a bunch of information that he already knows. Namely, every year their middle school gives all the students a free week-long vacation at a first-class ski resort in Vermont. Why? Well, who cares? Free vacation! Logan can't go skiing with everyone else because he's in Aruba, so Marianne has volunteered to write copious notes. That way Logan will know everything that happened on this vacation. Everything! Especially the parts where they decided what candy to get from the vending machine. That stuff is important. You might be wondering why Logan hears all about the girls' vacation, but none of them hear about his vacation. That's because no one cares. Got it? Good. Let's continue. Stacy describes the bus ride there. She starts by noticing that New York has way more people than Vermont does. How do people even survive in such a backwards, not New York place? Life must be awful for them. She also complains when they stop at a restaurant and the people there are unhappy to see hundreds of loud middle schoolers make a huge mess without paying anything. How rude! You'd never get bad service like that in New York! Geez, Stacy, save it for the New York super special. Dawn narrates as they get settled into the lodge. She says it reminds her of the hotel in the Stephen King movie The Shining. You know, the R-rated murder movie that Dawn is way too young to have seen? That murder movie. The lodge is just like that! This is exactly the wrong note to start their vacation on, because now I'm scared for the babysitters' lives. Mallory must also be scared because she almost starts crying when she realizes she and Jessie aren't allowed to stay with the other girls. Disaster strikes when a bus full of kids crashes near the hotel. The adults are hospitalized, and Christy volunteers the Babysitters Club to take care of the kids for free. The teachers and hotel owners agree to this plan because in Babysitters Club world, adults totally pawn abandoned school children off on 13-year-olds. The kids and the babysitters get their own personal dorm now, so Mallory can stop crying about being separated from the others. Marianne researches the history of the lodge, and she learns that it's haunted by a ghost. Didn't we do this story in the previous book? Nobody at the hotel wants to talk about the ghost, so Marianne is convinced it's real. She's so scared she decides to write Logan a love letter. Because evil ghosts are romantic? My dearest Logan, you can't possibly know how much I miss you. My thoughts are with you each and every second of every day. For once, I'm glad this series was written before cell phones existed, because otherwise we'd have 150 pages of Logan and Marianne texting each other non-stop. As it is, Marianne starts to worry that maybe Logan found a cute vacation girlfriend, and now their relationship is doomed! Jessie babysits the kids, and she butts heads with a girl named Pinky. Pinky is mean and bratty to everyone, and Jessie hates her almost as much as her racist neighbor. Pinky is so awful that Jessie eventually gives her a book to read and refuses to talk to her for the rest of the morning. Because good babysitters ignore kids. Stacy gets a vacation boyfriend named Pierre Pierre D. He's French, he's nice, and his voice is changing right now. Stacy thinks it's attractive that he's getting a deeper voice, while I'm chuckling because I imagine his voice cracking with every line of dialogue. Mallory is horrified when they announce they're holding a dance. A dance with boys! Mallory hates boys, and Jim. Then Mallory decides to spy on people and write about it in her journal. You know, the same thing she did in Super Special number 1. It's a little more interesting this time around because she goes into La La Land. She ships 2 of her teachers together, and she decides the chef is a homicidal maniac because he has knives and sprinkled powder in the soup. Dawn enters a skating competition, but she's a complete failure. She falls on the ice in round 1, she drops the baton in round 2, and in round 3, Christy picks someone else to be on her team. She also trips when trying to get into a ski lift, and all the kids make fun of her. Dawn gives up and goes back inside, where she complains to Marianne. But Marianne's too busy thinking about Logan to care about anybody else's problems right now, so the 2 girls get into a big fight. Marianne asks everybody about the ghost until she learns there is no ghost. It's just some guy died in a bathtub 50 years ago. That's not scary, but you know what is scary? Logan's vacation girlfriend! He's probably kissing her! Oh no! Christy is still mad that her team lost the skating competition. Next is the snow sculpture competition. She preps her team by, giving them the afternoon off so she can make snowmen with the little kids. What? She has a team practice with little kids instead of her team? How does that help them prepare? Claudia loves art, so she's the judge of the snow sculpture competition. Claudia picks someone from her own team as the winner. Christy rightfully points out that it's unfair to have one of the team members be a judge, but everybody ignores her. Poor Christy. She challenged Claudia to a sports rivalry, but Claude isn't interested. She cares more about the gorgeous French ski instructor named Guy. At least I think he's French. His accent is pretty awful, so it's hard to tell where he's from. Either way, he takes a special interest in Claudia, and she loves it when he puts his arms around her. That's when Claudia remembers her boyfriend Will. Is it cheating on him to have a crush on a 30-year-old guy? Yes. Yes, it is. Also, it's creepy that he's over twice her age. Claudia thinks about it for a while and decides that Will is nothing compared to her feelings for Guy, so it's totally okay for her to cheat on him. What an awful girlfriend. Jessie holds auditions for the school talent show, which are pretty entertaining, although I find it a little weird that the kids are all singing songs and imitating celebrities from the 50s, not the 80s. It's almost like they're kids from the author's generation, not modern day, huh? Either way, Jessie's glad that people are respecting her as an authority figure. Well, everyone except Pinky respects her. Pinky glares at Jessie, and Jessie decides she's prejudiced against black people. Mallory tries explaining that's not true, but Jessie ignores her. Dawn continues to fail at life, and she feels so bad she goes to the bathroom to cry. Inside, she sees Pinky crying. Pinky confesses she's homesick, and that's why she's been mean the whole time. Dawn realizes she's also been mean because she's insecure, so she apologizes to Marianne for fighting with her. They both cry a lot and become friends again. So this chapter is Dawn crying, Pinky crying, Dawn crying, and Marianne crying, and Dawn crying again. It's the crying chapter. Claudia and Christy's team square off in the big snowball fight competition, which is on the cover of this book. Guess what, though? We never see the snowball fight because Marianne narrates that chapter and she decides to stay inside. A whole lot of build-up for nothing. Marianne writes happy love letters to Logan until she gets a long-distance phone call. She worries something bad happened to her cat or her house burned down, but it turns out it's Logan on the phone. He says he misses her a whole lot and his vacation girlfriend doesn't exist. Oh, thank goodness. Mallory's journaling goes badly. She decides the chef isn't poisoning people since nobody died. Great detective skills there, Mal. Also, she gets caught when she spies on Stacy and Pierre kissing, so she gives up on spying forever. Jessie narrates the talent show, and she talks with Pinky. Pinky cries because she's still homesick, and she apologizes for being mean to Jessie. Jessie's a little startled to find out that Pinky isn't racist. She wonders if she's the racist one, because she ignored the truth in order to assume something bad about a white girl. She decides to discuss this with her parents when she gets home. Claudia wins the ski competition against Christy, but her heart is broken when she learns that Guy has a wife and kids. She quickly decides that Guy was too old for her anyway, and besides, she loves her boyfriend Will too much to think about other men. In other words, Claudia only loves Will whenever there isn't a cuter boy nearby. Their relationship is built on lies! Someone should tell Will about this. Christy pressures several of her classmates into joining the final competition, even though they're unprepared. One of them breaks his leg as a result, and Christy feels incredibly guilty. She makes it up to him by spending the dance with him, so 5 out of the 7 storylines in this book revolve around cute guys. I think this book needs more variety. Mallory freaks out over the dance, and she unsuccessfully tries to get out of it by volunteering to babysit. Everything turns out okay when a cute guy from her math class asks to dance with her. They dance all night long, and he pretends not to notice when she steps on his feet. What a nice guy! I know he only shows up for a page at most, but I already like him way more than the other boyfriends in this book. Speaking of, remember Stacy's boyfriend? Yeah, I don't remember him either, because her last chapter was 130 pages ago. That's over half the book. Well, Pierre and Stacy go to the dance together, they talk about her friends, and they exchange addresses, because email isn't a thing yet. Marianne closes the book by talking about the bus ride home and everything that happened afterwards. As promised, she compiles everything into a book for Logan, but she selectively edits out all the parts that make her look bad. Because love is built on lies. Is that the moral of this book? I think it is. The end. Post-book follow-up. My main complaint against the super specials is how shallow they are. Each girl is limited to 3 chapters each, and that's not enough room to develop an in-depth storyline or rounded characters. Stacy is the best example of this in this particular book. In one chapter, she meets Pierre for the first time. In her next chapter, she has to break up with him because vacation is over. It's a super rushed storyline that skips over all the interesting stuff with Pierre, like her falling in love with him. I didn't like that. I also didn't like how she completely isolated herself from all the other girls. It almost makes it feel like she wasn't in the book at all. Mallory was also kind of isolated from the others because she spent half of her time inside spying on people instead of talking to them. Thank goodness she gave up that storyline for the more interesting dance story. Jessie was also isolated from the rest of the Babysitters Club, but it didn't feel that way because she constantly interacted with other people. I'd say I liked Mallory and Jessie's stories, which were mostly fun and light-hearted stories. They got way better treatment here than the last super special, where Mallory only had 1 chapter and Jessie had 2, and it wasn't very good. Christy's story was fine, although I could swear she's learned a lesson about being too competitive before. I'm mainly just upset that we saw all of the sports competitions except the snowball fight, which was probably the best one. Who doesn't want to see Christy throw a snowball directly into Claudia's face? Christy shares a bunk bed with Ashley Wyeth, the strange girl from book 12. Ashley is shy about being around Christy, and for a moment I thought Christy's story was going in a totally different direction. But no, Ashley is mostly forgotten outside of that chapter, and what could have been the most interesting part of the book disappears with her. I didn't like Claudia's storylines at all. It felt like she was copying the other girls. Stacy already fell in love with a French guy. Dawn and Marianne already had a feud. Claudia does the exact same things after they did. It feels derivative and less interesting. And further, this makes 3 vacation boyfriends for her and 3 super specials. Could we please give her something else to do? I was surprised when Claudia said that she and her boyfriend Will have been regularly writing and calling each other for the past 6 months. Heck, I'm surprised that he's her boyfriend. Why didn't this get mentioned in Claudia's last book? Does Will only exist in the super special universe? Continuity! Dawn's story was good, although I would have preferred a story about the California girl seeing snow for the first time. Other people thought the Dawn story was dumb and out of character for her, which it is, but I thought it was interesting how we saw the Dawn-Marianne fight from both girls' perspectives, so I liked that. Marianne, I did not like. She was pretty insufferable in this book. She spent the entire time being ditzy and daydreaming about Logan. It wasn't fun to see her worry about a girl who doesn't exist. Her ghost story subplot went nowhere. It was dropped from the book and never mentioned again. Same with her brief subplot focusing on the gym teacher. I guess Marianne got 4 stories because she's the narrator this time. Yeah, well, when the series is over, every babysitter will have her own super special, except Mallory. She gets nothing. She also didn't get her own episode on the TV show. I like to joke that I don't like Mallory, but I think Anne Martin dislikes her way more than I do. According to the advertisement at the end of book 29, the original title for this book was Babysitter's Winter Carnival. In the first chapter, they refer to their vacation as the annual Winter Carnival, but the term doesn't get used for the rest of the book. I can see why they changed the title to mirror the title of the last super special. The first super special had a lot of page-wasting illustrations. The second one had a bunch of page-wasting letters. This book has both. They're fine, but it's still 30 pages of fluff when we could have had 3 more chapters instead. Overall, I liked 4 of the 7 stories in this book, which is a majority, but I'm still not sold on the concept of the Babysitter's Club Super Special. This is a double-length book. It should have larger stories, not smaller stories. At least something different from the girls go on vacation and meet cute guys again. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 3, Babysitter's Winter Vacation, a 6 out of 10. Which 2 babysitters would you leave on a deserted island? I'd pick Stacy and Mallory. That way I wouldn't have to hear about New York or being 11 ever again. And Martin decided to go with Dawn and Claudia, which I guess is fine by me. No more bad handwriting or California stories. Wait, the girls get rescued from the deserted island? They don't leave the series forever? Boo!
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. The premise is that Dawn and Claudia are both experienced at boating, something which has never been mentioned before ever in the past 30-plus books. They boat in the ocean, because Stony Brook is right on the coast of Connecticut. Again, something which has never been mentioned before ever. You'd think they would mention their town has a beach at one point. Claudia and Dawn are going to be racing each other.
You know, said Marianne, I really hope you win. I almost replied, duh. Why wouldn't she want her own sister to win? But instead I just said, thanks.
Yes, when Marianne says something nice, Dawn's first reaction is to be a jerk about it. The Babysitter's Club! The best friends you'll ever have. Marianne gets her own chance to be a wicked stepsister when Dawn forgets to give Marianne a message from her boyfriend. Marianne fights with Dawn, and she wishes Dawn was out of her life forever. The race is a tie, so the girls decide to re-race. Some of the kids hear about it, and they ask if they can join. It's decided Dawn will take Jamie Newton and her brother Jeff, while Claudia will take Haley Braddock and Becca Ramsey. The trip goes well until disaster strikes. A monster storm appears out of nowhere. Everyone's soaked, they're blown way off course, Dawn's boat is destroyed, and they are marooned on an unknown island. They pull themselves onto the shore, and the kids start singing as they look for shelter. Really? They start singing after a near-death experience? Has Anne Martin ever met kids in real life before? Because this book is telling me she hasn't. The castaways take shelter in a cave, and I have to say, for experienced sailors who have taken classes for months, Claudia and Dawn are pretty incompetent. Like, they don't have a radio, or a map, or a GPS, or a compass, and they don't even know how to tell directions from the position of the sun. So, because they don't know which way is west, they decide not to use the boat to try sailing back to the mainland. Really awful plan there, girls. The book is peppered with stories of the other babysitters. The other girls get 2 chapters each. Except Mallory and Jessie, they get 1 chapter each. Mallory cries a lot, and she's sad when they discover wreckage from Dawn's boat. Jessie complains about her bossy Aunt Cecilia, and it's basically just an extended preview of the next book in the series. Stacy's in New York when she gets the news. She wants to go back right away, but Dad says no because he's scheduled to have her all weekend, and it took him forever to get theater tickets, and besides, Stacy can't do anything to help. Those are all very good points, but Stacy doesn't care. Dad's being super unfair by wanting to spend time with the daughter he never sees. Ugh, being a divorced kid is the worst. The next day, the castaways explore the island, and just kidding. Why would they do that? That would make sense. No, our heroes decide to stay on the little beach, and they never go anywhere else. Except Jeff, he sneaks off and catches fish for everyone. We're never told where he gets the fish from. Is there a river or a pond on the island? And we're not told how he's able to catch so many fish with just a stick and a string. He just does accept it. Christy realizes she's got a baseball game scheduled for Monday. She calls Bart to cancel the game, and 70 pages later, he answers the phone. Bart must be upset about being on hold for so long because he's an angry jerk about it. He accuses Christy of making things up because her team is a bunch of losers. But the next day, Bart sees a news report about the emergency, and he realizes Christy was telling the truth. He apologizes, and they laugh about how often Christy exaggerates. Is that something Christy does a lot? because I don't remember that from other books. Continuity! If anything, Claudia should be the one with the reputation for making things up. Miss, there's a phantom caller about to kill me, and I think I've been adopted because Mom and Dad don't have enough baby pictures of me. The kids go swimming, and Claudia goes back to the boat. Oops! They forgot to anchor the boat or pull it ashore, so it floated away! Again, how are Claudia and Dawn expert boaters? Haley throws a temper tantrum when she learns the boat is gone. Ah, see, that's how a real kid would react to being stranded and left alone to die. Speaking of dying, Jamie gets a hospital-level disease. He's delirious, he has a fever and chills. Dawn watches over him the whole night and feeds him water. Marianne fights with her boyfriend Logan, because all the boyfriends are jerks in this book. Marianne turns around and she's a jerk to some reporters. In fact, all of the girls are mean to reporters, and they complain about the press at length. I thought it was pretty out of character for Marianne to mouth off to strangers and have Charlotte Johansson laugh and compliment her for it. Maybe the author had a bad experience with a reporter and she was just blowing off steam? Stacy writes her dad a letter saying her time is her time, not her parents' time, so she should be allowed to do what she wants. Stacy is apparently unaware that she's 13. Dad gives in and he lets her go home early. Dad is also unaware that she's 13. Stacy proceeds to do nothing worthwhile in order to help find her missing friends. Way to go, Stacy. We're getting close to the end of the book, so we need to wrap everything up. Claudia walks down the beach for the first time, and she finds a mirror. Whoa! How useful! She can use it to signal airplanes. And next chapter, an airplane shows up! What a coincidence! Claudia signals the airplane with the mirror, and they get rescued. So basically, they're rescued by plot convenience. The entire town is happy to see them, and the mayor gives a fancy speech. There's a press conference, the story's written up in the newspaper, and as usual for super specials, we finish with handwritten letters that I can't read. The end. Post-book follow-up. Let me start with the nice stuff. I liked this book. It's incredibly different from the rest of the series, which is great. I want the super special books to be super special. I also like the photorealistic illustrations, which are a major step up from the doodles in previous super specials. I also like how the book kept the narrative focused on Claudia and Dawn. That's good. We don't need 3 full chapters of Stacy in New York where she's not doing anything that affects the castaways. Also, there are no vacation boyfriends in this book. A welcome break from that tired plot line. Now for the bad stuff. Claudia and Dawn are extremely incompetent in this book. Part of that is because they wouldn't be stranded if they knew what they were doing, but still, they don't even try to explore the island. Why not? They knew enough to look for shelter and to start a fire, but they didn't know enough to look for food and water, and nobody's curious as to where Jeff gets all the fish from either. These are some very complacent castaways. I think the flow of the book was harmed by switching back and forth between the island and the mainland because nothing interesting happened on the mainland. Chrissy, Marianne, and the others are irrelevant to the story. They don't do anything besides cry, worry, and insult reporters. Another reviewer suggested that this was originally a normal-sized book, and Anne Martin just tacked on all the mainland chapters to make it super special-sized. This book's cover and title are pretty misleading, making you think it's a fun cruise book like the first super special. And why is Jamie larger than Jeff? The 4-year-old is larger than the 10-year-old. Christy looks like she has to go to the bathroom, and I only figured out who Haley is because everybody else was taken. Other people complained that the plot was utterly ridiculous and unrealistic. The prologue to the book mentions the K and Baby Island, and sarcastic reviewers said, "Oh, there you go, Anne Martin's telling us right up front where she stole the idea from." I'd like to think she's just being nice and suggesting some good books for us to read. Sort of like how the Summer Camp Super Special mentioned camped movies, and the adoption book mentioned an adoption book. Overall, I enjoyed this book. It was an intriguing idea, and it played out well, even if the babysitters have to make some stupid mistakes in order for it to happen. If the TV show had lasted more than 3 months, I could easily see this being a TV movie for the show. I would have done the story differently, true, with more focus on the island exploration and less focus on insulting reporters, but it still works. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 4, Babysitter's Island Adventure, a 7 out of 10. About this cover, my wife said either Stacy's bikini is supposed to be scandalous, or the artist just didn't know how to paint bikinis. I agree, Stacy's bikini is off. But what disturbs me about this cover is Mallory. I can't believe I'm saying this, but she's actually pretty hot, showing off her curves with a red suit that perfectly offsets her hair. Mallory is 11. She should not be a Baywatch babe. Just no, cover artist. No way!
Arglefumph Book Review. Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. The premise is that the Babysitters Club won the lottery, so now they're off to California for... They won the lottery? Really? Middle schoolers won the lottery. That's illegal! That's highly improbable! That's... whatever. They won the lottery, so now they're in California for 2 weeks. First things first, let's make some enemies! Dawn introduces her friends to the We Heart Kids Club. Christy instantly hates them because their club is a rip-off of the Babysitters Club. A bad rip-off. They don't have club officers or a notebook. What madness is this? There must be a club notebook because there is no way somebody could know their own schedule. That's just impossible. Christy almost dies from a heart attack when learning they don't have regular club hours. People just call when it's convenient to them. But that's against Babysitter Club rules. How dare they make things more convenient for parents? Christy decides to show them how real babysitters handle things, so she volunteers to babysit for 2 crazy boys named Eric and Ryan. Dawn butts heads with Carol, Dad's new girlfriend. Dawn hates how Carol pretends to be young and hip. She tries to be friends with them. Ugh. Go away, old lady. You're not cool. Carol takes them all to the beach, where she gives everyone bad advice. Specifically, she thinks Stacy should surf with the dangerous kids, Mallory should dye her hair blonde, and Claudia should get vacation boyfriend number 4. Ugh, not more vacation boyfriends. Maybe we should have left Claudia on the abandoned island in the last super special. The next Dawn chapter is over 150 pages later, so try not to forget about her subplot in the meantime, okay? Crazy how Dawn is the narrator and the most ignored character at the exact same time in this book. Stacy goes surfing with her new friends, and she gets Claudia in contact with cute guy Terry. He immediately asks Claudia out for a dinner and a movie. Claudia likes Terry, but she feels awkward because he's too smart for her. It's like dating her older sister. Ew. The restaurant menu and the movie is all in Italian, and Claudia can't follow it at all. She asks her friends for advice on what to do. Dawn says, you should be yourself, while Carol says Claudia should change her personality to fit Terry's. That's really awful advice there, Carol, and now I'm starting to question the relationship between Carol and Dawn's father. But we need drama in this book, so Claudia decides to go with Carol and pretend to be somebody she's not. Marianne gets to babysit a cute little girl named Steffi, who is basically Marianne but 5 years younger. They bond over their dead mothers and strict fathers, and Marianne constantly worries that Steffi will have an asthma attack. And even though Marianne is on vacation, Christy makes her write up these babysitting jobs for the club notebook. Thanks, Christy. Mallory is the last in the narrator rotation. Poor Mallory! You have to wait 80 pages to hear from her. Mallory convinces everyone to go to a giant mall, and she runs off to the makeup counter. She wants a full makeover and blonde hair, because everybody in California is blonde. That's obviously not true, but Mallory thinks it is. The person at the counter is smart enough to know what's up, so she gives Mallory washout dye, nothing permanent. Mallory spends all of her money on the makeup, and now she's dead broke. Yeah, she has no money, even though the premise of the book is that she won the lottery. Ugh. Mallory uses the hair dye, and now she's blonde, and she feels like a real California girl. Meanwhile, Jessie meets up with Derek Masters, the actor kid from book 27. He takes her to the TV studio, and she learns about how TV shows are made. They get made slowly, it seems, because the director spends over 3 hours getting a 10-second shot of the outside of a schoolhouse. Jessie gets to be an extra in the shot, and Derek suggests that she get a real acting job while she's here in California. Jessie considers it, but no, she can't. She only has 1 chapter left in this book. That's not enough time to start a new storyline. Stacy goes surfing again, but this time a guy named Bo is driving. He's a maniac who breaks all sorts of driving laws, and the group laughs because it's so exciting. Then Stacy gets hit by the wave of metaphors, which knocks her off her board of excitement, crashing into the sea of reality. The We Heart Kids Club appears again, prompting the BSC to recap their entire vacation so far. There's a scheduling conflict because Chrissy's scheduled to babysit the Wild Kids the same day they go to Universal Studios. Christy offers to take the kids along, and the California babysitters decide she's crazy. Claudia and Terry go to a French restaurant where she picks a food at random. It ends up being snails. Ugh. She's disgusted and cries on the car ride home. And if I could go on a random tangent here, I had escargot every night on my honeymoon. It was great! Snails don't have much taste, so you drown them in butter and garlic, and it is amazing. I'd totally eat them again. The trip to Universal Studios takes several chapters. Mallory bums money for tickets off of Jessie, and Mallory is sad when she's not picked as an audience volunteer. Didn't the employee notice her fancy California blonde hair? Chrissy's wild kids are wild and make a huge mess, but then they go on a scary ride and they're scared. But the kids don't want to admit they're scared, so they do what Christy tells them to do. Christy treats this like it's a great babysitting lesson, and she's happy to help them save face by ordering them around. So the moral is, if kids don't behave, scare them until they do what you say? I don't really get it, but you know Christy, she never turns down an opportunity to boss people around, and hey, at least the kids are well behaved now. Steffi is also scared by the scary ride, and Marianne worries Steffi will have an asthma attack until she figures out that Steffi enjoys all the scary things. Claudia feels bad that she's not smart enough for Terry, so she calls Janine and asks for help with smart person talk. Janine tells Claudia to be herself around Terry, because she's interesting in her own right. So Claudia invites Terry along with the group when they go through Hollywood. He likes it, even if it's low-brow entertainment, and he kisses her as they leave. Jessie and Mallory are semi-feuding over Mallory's blonde hair and makeup. Jessie doesn't like fighting with her best friend, so she decides to patch up their differences. She talks to Mallory, and completely changes the subject. Great problem resolution there, Jessie! She invites Mallory to the TV studio, where Mallory freaks out over everything. Mallory volunteers to be an extra, but the director says she doesn't look the part.
He said my looks aren't right. How could he mean that? I've never looked better. I'm a California girl. It was not the right time to tell Mal that that phrase had absolutely no meaning.
If California Girls has no meaning, then why did you name the book that? Seriously. Mallory apologizes to Jessie for being a pain and acting stupid. Mallory feels depressed and spends the rest of the vacation hiding in her room, refusing to talk to anyone. The other girls intervene and convince Mallory that she looks fine the way she normally does. Why, if somebody drew a picture of her for a book cover, she'd probably be a Baywatch babe! The girls get red hair dye for Mallory to get her hair back to the right shade. Her parents don't notice the difference. Either that or they don't care. Take your pick. Stacy goes surfing again, but Bo is an extra wild driver today. He goes over the speed limit and causes a huge accident. Stacy is slightly bruised, but she's badly shaken. Bo tells everybody to lie to the police about what happened, but Stacy refuses. She does the right thing and tells the truth about the accident. Carol picks up Stacy from the hospital, and she makes Stacy tell the story to Dawn's dad. Dawn is shocked that Carol is acting like an adult for the first time. As an adult myself, I'm not impressed with Carol. She doesn't take care of the situation, she just passes on the job to Dawn's dad. That's lazy, not parenting. But Dawn is impressed, and she likes Carol now that Carol's an adult. Dawn talks over with Dad, and she gives him permission to marry her. Marianne babysets Steffi a third time, and they're both sad they'll never meet each other again. Steffi has an asthma attack, just like Marianne feared, but Marianne keeps her head clear and helps the sick child. She's good at that sort of thing. The girls have a heart-to-heart, and they decide to be pen pals. On the last day of the vacation, they go to Magic Mountain in a medieval restaurant. Dawn talks to Jeff about Carol, and she writes a heartfelt letter to Carol. She recaps the entire book, for the sake of the readers who skip straight to the end without reading everything, And Dawn finishes with the joke that maybe they'll win the lottery again and go on vacation to New York. I think she just spoiled the plot line of Super Special 6. Thanks a lot, Dawn. The end. Post-book follow-up. You know how the first Super Special felt like an advertisement for Disney World? This book felt like an advertisement for Universal Studios. They spent 3 chapters there, and we list every single attraction they go to. Most of the attention is put on the special effects show. I wonder if they still have that attraction. We do all of our special effects through computers today. Here's a picture of the computer that did Lord of the Rings. Isn't that fancy? What a great computer. The narration cycle in this book was pretty solid, with the exception of Christy dropping out with over 100 pages left in the book, also Dawn disappearing for 150 pages. Other than that, the book does a fair job of keeping everyone in the rotation and not ignoring any particular character for too long. Every chapter in the book starts with a postcard that takes up 2 pages. Sometimes there's a blank page after the postcard, sometimes there's not. Continuity! The postcards don't affect the story, they're just a flimsy excuse to take up 50 pages. As always, I don't like them. I can understand the argument that the postcards add to the atmosphere and make it seem more like a real vacation, but no, I'd rather have no postcards and 5 more chapters. It would be 5 full chapters, because almost every chapter in this book is exactly 10 pages long. They're very consistent about that. Actually, that's probably why the chapters have irregular blank pages. The shorter chapters got a blank page just to bump them up to the 10-page limit. There aren't any illustrations in this book, except for little doodles on the postcards. I noticed that the signatures at the top of each page are slightly different. Like someone wrote Dawn 6 times and they cycled through all the different signatures. That is a level of detail I was not expecting. I would have copy-pasted the same signature on every single page. Okay, enough talking about the book in general. What about the stories? Christy's story had a good setup of her feuding with the We Heart Kids Club, but then the story turns into Christy babysits rowdy kids, and we never see the We Heart Kids Club again. There's no resolution to any of the tension between Christy and the WHKC, and I didn't really like how bossing the kids around was presented as a good solution to misbehavior. Jessie and Stacy also had stories which changed direction partway through. Stacy had a story about learning to surf, which turned into a cautionary tale about wild drivers. Jessie had a story about Derek Masters, which turned into a Jessie-Mallory fighting story. The stories were fine, it just felt weird to change the focus of the story halfway through. If each girl only has 3 chapters to tell a story, you'd think each story would be really focused, you know? Like Claudia's story! That was well done and focused. I rolled my eyes at the idea of her getting another vacation boyfriend, but he was mildly interesting, and it was a little different to see Claudia struggle because she doesn't think she's smart enough for him. So thumbs up for that. Also a thumbs up for Marianne's storyline, which was nice. Marianne babysits the younger version of herself. I liked seeing them get along. I didn't like Mallory's story much, and I think it's because the book never explains why Mallory feels the need to be a blonde California girl. She just all of a sudden decides she needs a vacation makeover. I would like to hear the reasoning behind this decision, even if it's as simple as she wants to try something new. Dawn's storyline felt like a big nothing, since she got all the intro chapters and multiple recap chapters. I guess it's interesting that she doesn't get along with Dad's new girlfriend, but she doesn't say much besides, "I hate Carol," over and over again. The conflict is too one-sided, if that makes sense. I liked how the other girls commented on Dawn's reaction to Carol in their narration, but none of them ever talked to Dawn about it at any point. Overall, I'd say this book is okay. Claudia and Marianne had the only stories I really liked, while the others were passable. I like the story ideas better than the stories themselves, and like other super specials, I can't help but feel 3 chapters isn't enough to start and finish a complete story for each character. Either try overlapping stories, like last book, or cut out the filler and give us more story. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 5, California Girls, a 6 out of 10. Despite what the cover would have you believe, the girls don't go to the Statue of Liberty in this book. So you could say they do sleep before they see all of it.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. Claudia's the narrator, so we start the book with 5 full pages of Claudia's handwriting. I read it all, so you don't have to. You're welcome. The story is that Claudia is going to take art classes in New York with famous artist Mackenzie Clark. The classes will take place during a 2-week vacation from school. This is what, the 3rd 2-week vacation they've had so far this year? I'm surprised these kids ever learn anything. Anyway, the babysitters have somehow managed to turn Claudia takes an art class into everybody gets a free New York vacation. Wow, these girls are master negotiators. Either that or their parents are dying for any excuse to get rid of them. Hard to tell. Christy narrates as they take a train into New York. She reminds everybody of book 18. Ugh, that book was awful. My main problem with that book is that all the girls were given new, annoying personalities. For example, shy Marianne, who never talks, became a history buff who never shuts up, while super confident Dawn became a huge crybaby. It made no sense why the girls changed so drastically. I'm sorry to say that in this book, Marianne and Dawn once again take up their out-of-character personalities. Yuck. Stacy's dad doesn't have a 9-person apartment, so they decide to split up into 2 groups. Dawn, Stacy, and Claudia will stay with Dad. The other 4 girls will stay with Stacy's friend Lane. In Lane's building, they meet some British diplomats named the Harringtons. The Harringtons need somebody to babysit their kids for the next 2 weeks. Oh, wow, what a crazy coincidence. Marianne and Stacy take the job because it basically means they're getting paid to be tourists. Scaredy cat Dawn can't walk down the street without screaming. She screams over a candy bar wrapper, a loud noise, and a man in a hat. She doesn't get any sleep that night because she's too frightened of burglars on the fire escape. The other babysitters have a serious talk with Dawn about her feelings, and haha, just kidding. They make snide comments about how she's such a wimp, and none of them invite Dawn to come along on their activities. So Dawn hides inside all day long. The Babysitters Club! The best friends you'll ever have. Okay, to be fair, Christy does spend a few hours with Dawn after lunch, but for the rest of the week, they leave her alone in the apartment and nobody cares. These girls are jerks. Stacy and Marianne take the kids to Central Park. They see the animals and the statues, and Stacy has fun people watching. She says that's a great thing about New York. You can look at people! She knows there are people in other cities, right? Stacy also brags that the zoo admission in Central Park will always be 10 cents. I checked online and, sorry Stacy, the price has gone up considerably. Claudia goes to the art class along with Mallory. Mackenzie doesn't make for a very good teacher. He ignores the students, he interrupts them, and he gives them orders all the time. He forces everybody to draw boxes for days on end. He compliments Mallory for trying hard, and he criticizes Claudia for going too fast. Claudia spends the rest of the book in a jealous huff, and she says nasty things about Mallory at every possible opportunity. It's honestly not that different from how she normally treats Mallory, so none of the other girls notice. Jessie's parents have forbidden her from traveling around New York by herself. She needs a chaperone at all times because she's only 11. The other girls ignore this rule, and they leave the apartment without her. That means Jessie is forced to stay inside all day. Geez, first they abandoned Dawn, now they abandon Jessie? New York really turns these girls into deserters. Luckily, Jessie manages to get Marianne's attention at the last minute, and she gets a ride to a ballet performance. In the audience, she meets a gorgeous black guy named Quint. He also does ballet, and he's good enough to get into Juilliard, which is a college. Why is an 11-year-old getting into college? This premise is ridiculous. But Quint says, oh no, he can't go there. Not because he's too young, but because all the boys on his block tease him for dancing. Mallory's chapter is unremarkable, much like she is. She has a tough time drawing art, and Claudia insults her constantly. Then everybody has dinner in Chinatown. Christy complains about Dawn, and she goes to Central Park. She finds a dog in the bushes, and she decides to keep it. The girls sneak the dog into Lane's room. Christy calls her parents at home, but they refuse to adopt a random stray. Uh-oh! Marianne takes the kids to a library and a museum. She notices a bunch of men in sunglasses and rain hats. She mentions this to Stacy, who doesn't care about men unless they're hot. Marianne eventually realizes, Wait, she hasn't been seeing a lot of men in the matching outfits. She's been seeing the same man over and over. Is he following them? Dawn is sad that nobody wants to stay with her, and she prepares to spend yet another day watching TV. That's when the doorbell rings. It's a boy named Richie Magnesi. He's also stuck inside the apartment due to a broken leg. Dawn thinks Richie is cute, especially his little rat tail. Ew. The two of them talk for a while, and he says the problem is that Dawn doesn't know the real New York. Instead of visiting famous places, she needs to visit different famous places. Like the Battery, or Green Witch, or that one taco cart. Richie takes Dawn on a grand tour of all of those spots, and she loves them so much, she hearts New York, and she forgets to be scared. The next art class is a repeat of the earlier ones. Mackenzie criticizes Claudia for working too quickly, while he praises Mallory. Claudia sulks instead of following her teacher's instructions. I'm pretty sure that won't solve your problems, Claudia. Jessie calls Quint and she goes to his house. Before she leaves, Lane makes sure to get Quint's name, address, phone number, and maybe his social security number, just in case.
It's just safer, Jessie. Trust me. Someone should always know where you are.
Because I'm 11?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with your age. If I visit a new friend, my mom or dad does exactly what I'm doing now.
So wait, let me get this straight. The girls are allowed to go anywhere they want and do anything they want with no adult supervision. But if they go to somebody's house, then they need permission? I do not understand these rules! And why does everybody else make fun of Dawn for not wanting to go anywhere alone when Jessie is the exact same way? Jessie and Quint watch old movies and have a great time until they leave the building. All the neighborhood boys make fun of Quint mercilessly. Quint says this is why he can't be a professional dancer. Jessie tells him he can't let jerks stop him from doing what he wants. Stacy's dad takes them on a boat tour. The mystery man reappears and Marianne worries he's a kidnapper. Stacy says they can't tell the Harringtons that a guy is following them everywhere because she's an irresponsible babysitter. Lane's parents discover Chrissy's hiding a dog in their apartment. They force Chrissy to find the dog a new owner. She takes it to the vet and puts up flyers. A young boy named Brandon calls and he adopts the dog. Marianne and Stacy see the mystery man a few more times. They start to get worried for the children's safety, and they tell the Harringtons about him at the end of the week. It turns out that the mystery man is their bodyguard, Bill. He's there to protect the children. The Harringtons didn't tell the babysitters about Bill because they are jerks who enjoy scaring babysitters for no reason. I mean, they wanted the kids to think they were having a real holiday. In the last art class, Claudia gets fed up with Mackenzie telling her to slow down all the time, so she works on the same picture for 3.5 hours. This picture finally gets his approval. Mackenzie apologizes for being so hard on Claudia. He says he pushed her hard because she's the best student with the most potential. Claudia is overjoyed that her art hero thinks she's the best, and it's a happy ending for her. As for Mallory, you know how every book says Mallory likes writing? Well, this is the first book where she actually does some story writing. 3 years of build-up, all for this moment. Mallory writes and draws a story about a mouse named Ryan. Then she talks with Mackenzie. He tells her art can improve if she puts a lot of effort into it, but no matter how hard she tries, she'll never match Claudia's natural talent. In other words, it'd be better if Mallory never does art again. Claudia will always beat her without even trying. Mallory would normally be upset to hear something like this, but she just decided she likes storytelling more than art, so she walks away happy. Jessie's final chapter starts with a very blank page. I know the journal entries at the start of every chapter are just an excuse to waste space, but still, that is some pretty blatant page wasting. Jessie and Quint see a ballet together, and she gives them a passionate speech about overcoming discrimination. Quint is inspired, and he decides to go to Juilliard after all. As Jessie leaves, Quint gives her her first kiss. She promises to stay in touch with him, and I'm told she does see him again in book 115. So, 7 years from now? We finish the book in style. The girls rent out a limo, they go to a famous restaurant, and they watch a play. Oh, and of course they go shopping. Afterwards, they reluctantly go back home to Stony Brook. The end. Post-book follow-up. I'm going to be honest, I didn't like this book. It felt like 200 pages from New York publishers bragging about how great their city is. That annoyed me in general, but in particular, I was annoyed at how the book assumes readers already know every location in New York. The book name drops a bunch of places that I've never heard of before, but it rarely bothers to explain what the places are like or why they're famous. So Richie's grand tour ends up being little more than a list of names to me, and it comes across as slightly pretentious. I know I'm being overly critical here, considering that the book is a travelogue, but it's a personal pet peeve of mine, which I developed after reading all those Nancy Drew Hardy Boys books, which also assume you're in love with New York and know the local geography. One of the ads in the back of this book promises a mysterious event later this year. I wonder what that could refer to. Oh, whoa! We're getting a mystery series? Well, then, I guess I have to add 38 more books to my reading list. My baby is going to be all grown up by the time I finish this series, isn't she? This book is illustrated by Anne Martin's father, Henry. Gee, I wish I had relatives that gave me jobs. The pictures are mostly of famous buildings in New York, including some that don't appear in this book, like the Empire State Building and the Brooklyn Bridge and Times Square. I wonder if those places were originally going to appear at some point, or if Henry just drew whatever he wanted. Normally in the super specials, everyone gets 3 chapters each. I noticed that Christy gets 4 chapters, while Mallory only gets 2. She stole one of Mallory's chapters! I noticed that this cover is where they took the pictures of Dawn and Mallory, which are on the cover of every other book in the series. Is that the best Dawn picture of the entire series? The best Mallory picture? I like the Dawn picture, yeah, that's good, but the Mallory one, not so much. Okay, time to talk about the storylines. I thought Christy's storyline was average. It's a good idea, and there are funny parts with them trying to keep the dog a secret. Still, I didn't much enjoy it. I thought it was a by-the-numbers lost dog story. I think the problem is that the best part of the story is them trying to hide the dog, but there's a week-long gap in between 2 of Christy's chapters. The book skips over the part that I liked most. There's also a time jump which skips over most of the search for a new owner. I don't know, maybe this is the same problem I've talked about with other super specials. 3 chapters is not long enough to fully start, develop, and finish a storyline. I know I would have liked Christy's story if it was developed more. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Marianne and Stacy's storyline. That did not need to be stretched out into 6 chapters. 4 would have been enough. And I found it annoying how they deliberately stretched things out by not telling the Harringtons about the mystery man. They should have told the parents the instant they thought the kids were in danger. But no, they put it off as long as possible. I also disliked the storyline because Marianne and Stacy acted the same way. It was like reading the same thing twice. I don't want to hear the same events from Stacy's perspective if her perspective is identical to Marianne's. Plus, most of their story was spent visiting famous places which don't get described in detail, which I complained about earlier. They easily could have improved this by giving Marianne the babysitting job and by giving Stacy a story with Lane. Lane is surprisingly absent from this book, considering that most of the girls live with her. She disappears every day and we never get told where she went. What does she do all day? Why doesn't she want to spend time with the others? Claudia and Mallory's art class also gets dragged out longer than necessary. Claudia waits 2 weeks to talk to her teacher about the issues that rose up on the first day of class. I thought it was realistic and interesting how Claudia was jealous of Mallory, but to be honest, I didn't like reading it. She came across as petty. Mallory's storyline was good, or at least I thought it was good how Mackenzie tried to let Mallory down gently. Mallory handled it like a champ, deciding not to let her art problems get to her, but instead she plays to her strengths. Good for you, Mallory. But I have to admit, I thought it was a cop-out ending. The only reason Mallory suddenly becomes obsessed with writing is because she needs something to fall back on. They should have introduced her love of writing a lot sooner, because it came out of nowhere. Dawn's storyline was bad. She's out of character and everyone acts like they hate her. Nobody even notices when she stops being scared of New York. Plus, Dawn's vacation boyfriend was rather pushy. Jesse's vacation boyfriend, on the other hand, was great! So great, he actually appears in the main series after this. I like seeing Jesse and Quint interact with each other, and it had a nice moral about sticking to your convictions in the face of discrimination. I like that. Overall, I didn't like the book. I liked Jesse's story, and I half liked some of the other stories, but the majority of the book does not work for me. I dream of a super special where every storyline is a winner, instead of 2 vacation boyfriend storylines, 2 art class storylines, 2 babysitting storylines, and a dog. Some variety would have greatly improved this book. The way the book is now, I don't want to be a part of it. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 6, New York, New York, a 2 out of 10. According to the first page, it snowed 23 inches in town. According to page 4, it snowed 28 inches. Wow, we're not even past the prologue, and we already have problems with continuity!
Arglefumph book review. Arglefumph book review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. All the girls are going to the Winter Wonderland dance on Friday. Christy is going with her boyfriend Bart, although she's still reluctant to call him her boyfriend. They make plans for what to wear to the dance, and Christy laughs at the idea that it will snow this week. Claudia is dating some random Japanese guy, but she doesn't say a whole lot about him because she has to explain how the Babysitters Club works and who the various club members are. I find it funny how the super specials can get all of the recap out of the way in 1 chapter, where normal books take 3 chapters to go through recap. Dawn is going to the dance with Price Irving. She tells the story of how they met. She noticed him a few weeks ago and developed a crush on him. She started thinking about asking him to the school dance. She accidentally ran into him when she was late for a class, and he asked her out. All of this boyfriend talk is clearly setting up for a big finale where the girls have romance at the dance. Am I right? Wrong. We don't see the dance, and none of the new guys ever get mentioned again. Ugh. Dawn, Claudia, and Stacy all had vacation boyfriends in previous super specials. Why not bring one of them back? That would be better than inventing new characters and immediately discarding them like useless trash. Dawn's brother Jeff is coming in from California. He's flown across the country about a dozen times at this point, but for the sake of dramatic tension, he suddenly has become super scared of airplanes. What if something bad happens and ruins the flight? Mallory's parents are going to New York for no particular reason. They just decide to randomly leave in the middle of the week so they can play tourist. It must be easy being a parent of 8 if you can abandon the kids whenever you feel like it. The Pikes won't be home until after midnight, which means Marianne and Mallory will be babysitting for 2 nights in a row. Stacy is getting a perm for the dance in order to impress her date, who she doesn't really care about. Whatever, it's still a good excuse to get a perm. Mom takes her to Washington Mall, which is a half-hour away. Of course, Stacy's hair ends up looking great. Christy invites Bart over to watch a couple of movies and stay for dinner. This is kind of a big step since they've never done stuff together on a weekday before, and he's never met her entire family at the same time. Naturally, her younger siblings are extra wild. David Michael won't stop teasing Christy. Karen is wearing a sweater as pants for some reason. Andrew giggles incessantly, and Emily Michelle wanders around with nothing but a diaper. Christy worries that Bart will be scared away forever, and he hasn't even met her older brothers yet. Poor Christy. Jesse's date for the dance is Quint from the last super special. Again, I don't understand the logic behind vacation boyfriends. We pretend none of them ever existed except Quint? I don't know, maybe Quint won the vacation boyfriend lottery. Anyway, Jessie is out of dance practice. The plan is that Jessie's dad will pick her up from practice, then they'll pick up Quint from a nearby train station. Throughout the entire book, people keep talking about snow. There are weather reports of a massive snowstorm on the horizon, but nobody believes it or bothers to prepare. These are not very responsible people. Well, the big snowstorm finally hits at this point of the book. Dance practice is canceled an hour early, but it's too late. None of the parents can make it there. Marianne wakes up in Mallory's bedroom, which I'm sure is a traumatic experience for anyone. The kids wake up and spend the whole morning singing songs from the author's childhood. The kids obsess over weather reports all day, and they're overjoyed when it starts snowing. I just noticed this is Marianne's first chapter. Including the prologue, Christy has had 3 chapters. That is not very fair distribution. Dawn's mom is worried about the snow. Richard offers to drive to the airport in her place, but she says no. Mom drives as slowly as she can, but she still loses control of the car and hits a mailbox. Mom swears, and this is the point where she should give up. She's not even a block away from her house. Just go back home and let Richard drive. He is used to driving in this type of weather. But no, Sharon insists on driving in the snow, and she has a particularly hard time of it. They almost get caught in a fender bender. Dawn keeps a running timer of how late they are, and she repeatedly complains Jeff is going to panic. Thanks for the pressure, Dawn. That chapter was so much fun. Let's do it again! In the next chapter, Stacy's mom insists on driving in the snow, and she has a particularly hard time of it. They fishtail when the car in front of them slams on the brakes. Mom decides to take the back roads home, and she soon gets lost. She stops on the side of the road for a half hour, and the car gets stuck in the snow. Christy's family continues to be wild, and the snow gets so bad it's not safe for Bart to walk home. It's decided he'll spend the night at Christy's house, and Christy panics. In the shortest and most neglected storyline, Claudia babysits for the Perkins girls. The kids are adorable, and their dog goes missing seconds before the power goes out. All the young kids at Jesse's dance practice are worried about the storm. Jesse is forced to babysit them because apparently none of the teachers can be bothered to do their jobs. Jesse worries what will happen to Quint when Quint himself shows up. Yeah, he walked all the way from the train station to here in the middle of a blizzard. And Bart can't go 3 blocks to his house? Quint is making Bart look bad. Mallory realizes they have a huge problem. There's no food to eat. Yes, Mom and Dad left the kids at home without any food. These are not responsible parents. In the Pike's defense, they left enough food for dinner and breakfast, but the kids would rather starve than eat frozen vegetables. They complain about the lack of food for Pages, but at least we get a picture of Mallory's mom jeans. You are rocking those jeans, Mallory. Jeff's flight gets delayed for an hour. Dawn and her mom are forced to wander around the airport. Dawn complains about how uncomfortable the chairs are and how bad the food is. Jeff's flight eventually gets rerouted to Washington, D.C., and Dawn thinks Jeff will be scared out of his mind. Stacy and her mom start to worry that they'll die, as Stacy needs her insulin injection and they don't have any food. Stacy forces her mom to talk about how she fell in love with Dad, which is a tad awkward since they just had an extremely unfriendly divorce. The car's heater stops working, but just when it seems like the end is near, Stacy's mom has got it going. Stacy's mom honks the car horn. A stranger in a station wagon hears, and he stops to help them. Claudia calms the kids down, and Claudia's mom braves the storm to make sure they're all okay. Claudia handles the situation admirably, and she even finds the dog in the basement. Once morning comes around, everything is all better. Quint continues to be a great guy as he helps Jesse prepare the kids for bed. Again, the teachers are useless, while the other older kids are just hiding in the back room. They make it through the night okay, and a nearby coffee shop gives them all free breakfast. The Pikes have breakfast, but they complain that they're still hungry. Marianne calls various food places, hoping that they'll do deliveries at 8 a.m. after a record-breaking snowstorm. They don't. Duh.
After that, I found Logan. I'm hungry, I whined to him, before I said hello or good morning or anything civil, and before I'd asked him how he'd survived the storm.
Marianne is a horrible girlfriend, by the way. Fortunately, Logan is a total chump. I mean, an amazing boyfriend, so he cross-country skis across town just to get Marianne some food. He is far too good for her. And the weird part is that Marianne's father actually comes by to visit, so he easily could have brought food, but she forgot to mention that when he was there, whatever. After this, Marianne calls her friends and learns what happened to them. This is a boring segment, because we already know what happened to her friends, we just read about it. Christy does not want Bart to see her typical messy morning self, so she wakes up at 5:30 a.m. to clean up. She shaves her legs for the first time, she curls her hair and puts on makeup. This takes her an hour and a half. Her brothers give her a hard time for dressing up, but Bart thinks she looks beautiful, so it's all worth it. If Bart can put up with her family and still like her, this relationship is going to work. Then there's a segment where Christy calls her friends and learns what happened to them. What's more boring than recapping the stuff readers already know? Recapping it twice. Dawn is so worried about Jeff she can't sleep. They stay at the airport overnight, and Dawn makes friends with a baby. Jeff's flight arrives 15 hours late, and it turns out there was no need to worry. Jeff had a great time. Stacy and her mom follow the stranger to his house. Stacy worries he's secretly a murderer. It turns out he's a wonderful person with a wonderful wife, a cute baby, and an obsession with Christmas decorations. Stacy and her mom stay with the kind strangers until the roads are cleared the next day. In the epilogue, the girls say the dance was wonderful. We get a picture of them, and wow. Stacy looks drunk, Jessie looks like she's trying to eat the photographer, and Mallory is, well, Mallory. The end. Post-book follow-up. I was impressed by the narration in this book. It is good. The girls all have distinct voices, unlike other books where they all basically sound the same. It's so good you can almost flip to a random page and figure out who the narrator is just by reading a few paragraphs. The last several books have been somewhat bland in this regard as the ghostwriters have started to take over, so it was a nice change of pace to see the girls act like their unique selves. It was also a change of pace to have a super special not be a vacation book. Although when I tried to summarize this book for my family, they thought it was all a repeat of the winter vacation book. Chrissy's storyline was my favorite of the book. It's cute how she's nervous over Bart. She worries over little things like, is it okay to sit next to him on the couch? And of course, I never object when Karen is cast as the annoying villain. I'll be honest, I like Bart as a boyfriend much better than Logan. Yes, I know Logan is the boyfriend of the Babysitters Club series, but Bart and Christy are just so darn cute together. Plus the Logan breakup book soured him in my eyes. Claudia's storyline was rather weak, and it probably would have been improved if she was babysitting a different family. I'm thinking Jackie Radowski or Jenny Prezioso. You know, one of the children that are harder to control. Seeing the perfect Perkins kids be perfect is just not that interesting to me. I like seeing Claudia overcome a bad situation, but compared to the other bad situations in this book, Claudia's sitting job was a walk in the park. Stacy's situation was the most interesting. I liked seeing the emotional connection between her and her mother, and there was a good amount of dramatic suspense. I thought it was a tad forced how Stacy was scared of the man who rescued them. You'd think she'd be less concerned about stranger danger when she's literally freezing to death. Marianne and Mallory's segments were okay, but the not enough food drama was entirely forced. There is enough food. The kids just refuse to eat it. Just because you'd rather have ice cream than veggies, it doesn't mean the veggies don't exist. They easily could have gotten food from a neighbor or Marianne's dad when he paid them a visit. As for the lack of breakfast, consider that both Mr. and Mrs. Pike originally planned to be home eating breakfast this morning. Since they're not here, that means there are 2 extra breakfasts. Why didn't the Pikes eat Mom and Dad's food if they were still hungry? Dawn's segments were okay if you honestly believe Jeff is scared of flying. Most of her time was spent complaining, but her complaints about the airport and the situation seemed natural. She also befriends a baby boy because, you know, she just gives off babysitter vibes which attract all children within a 2-mile radius. Jessie's parts were good. It was nice to see Quint again, and she also turned the situation into a babysitting job. I think what made it stand out were the various details about the characters and the location. It certainly felt more realistic than, say, her last book. So this super special is a winner. Stacy, Jessie, and Christy's storylines were good. The other 3 storylines were okay, and like I said, the overall writing quality pushed this one over the top for me. I can understand why some readers are upset that the book built up to a big dance and new boyfriends, which we never get to see. Yeah, it would have been nice to have a dance chapter finale, narrated by Claudia to top things off, but I think the book is good enough as it stands. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 7, Snowbound, an 8 out of 10. The premise of this book is that Watson's aunt owns a vacation cabin at Shadow Lake. Watson visited there about 25-30 years ago, so she's thinking of giving it to him for free. Wow, that is generous. I've no idea why his aunt and uncle bought the cabin in the first place, since there's only 2 of them, and the cabin is designed to house 28 people. It's lucky they bought such an unnecessarily large cabin, though, because it means everyone gets to bring their friends there! Except Charlie. He doesn't have any friends. Poor Charlie.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. Christie starts by explaining who all the BSC members are. They have a club meeting. Logan and Shannon are at this meeting for no particular reason. They don't talk or anything, and they never get mentioned again outside of this chapter. It's weird. Dawn narrates the drive there, where they have trouble fitting everything into 3 cars. Jessie narrates as they unpack at the cabin. She sees a black guy who's around her age. He must be wearing a vacation boyfriend t-shirt because Jessie decides he's hot and she stares at him all the time. She worries that this counts as cheating on Quint, her kind of boyfriend. Then she goes back to staring at his royal hotness. Stacy is annoyed by Christie's brother Sam. He won't leave her alone. He stares at her, calls her darling, and compliments her in his goofy manner. Stacy thinks this is the worst, but readers agree this is the best. Stacy and Sam were totally making a love connection in the first book in the series. It's been 60 books since then, so it's about time they followed up on this romance. Marianne babysits Karen, who gets lost in the woods. Instead of throwing a party like I would, Marianne decides to go looking for her. Meanwhile, Dawn decides Shadow Lake is a weird name, so there must be a mystery here somewhere. Like maybe there's a monster living in the lake. Dawn vows to find the monster and solve the mystery. The other girls tease her about it because, well, Dawn should really save those stories for the mystery series. The girls also make fun of Mallory. Poor Mallory gets eaten alive by bugs and mosquitoes. She is forced to coat herself with smelly bug spray, and she makes a ridiculous-looking beekeeper's mask to protect her head. Basically, the entire book is Mallory being a huge dork and embarrassing herself. So, no different from usual. Karen is one of this book's narrators. Hooray! Karen and her friends explore the woods, where they find an old shed. They decide to clean it up and play Secret Garden. Christie finds an old speedboat, and she takes boating lessons. Off-screen. She decides to enter the boat in a local boat show. The girls go to a restaurant for dinner, where they have fun pretending to be adults. They fight over their outfits for 2 pages, because that's what adults do? Oh no, it's because Mallory looks hideous. Gotcha. The restaurant has a flyer saying there will be a dance on the last day of the vacation. This is what, the 4th super special that ends with a dance? Ugh. Jessie talks with Hot Guy, whose name is Daniel. He asks her to give him dance lessons because she's great at ballet. Jessie figures he's flirting with her, but she doesn't mind. They have fun dancing and talking, even though she openly admits they have nothing in common. Jessie decides she likes flirting with him, forget Quint, and she says yes when he asks her to the dance. In Mallory's chapter, she complains about bugs, and everyone insults her outfit.
You smell, said my brother. You're an embarrassment, added Christie.
The Babysitters Club! The best friends you'll ever have! David Michael narrates a chapter. His friends Nikki and Linny won't stop fighting with each other, which is a problem. The boys quickly put aside their differences when they get a chance to fight with the girls. The girls say the boys can't go into their shed, and the boys say they're gonna build their own shed. So they make a bet. Whoever has the best looking house at the end of vacation gets a month without chores. Claudia, dang, her first chapter is halfway through the book? Poor Claudia. She steals Christie's storyline as she decides to decorate the boat for the boat show. She wonders how to decorate it while she babysits some kids. Sam narrates a chapter. Just like Super Special 2, I get the sense the author has no idea how teenage boys think. So Sam talks endlessly about his ideas for prank phone calls and how he can't wait to shave his whiskers. He's memorized all the different razors and aftershave and colognes, and someone's trying too hard. Sam tries to impress Stacy with shaving cream and pranks, and it's such a huge failure that Charlie, I have no friends Thomas, Give Sam some romance advice. Instead of being a weirdo around girls, you should be nice to girls. They like that much better. So Sam tells Stacy that he likes her, and she isn't sure how to respond. Marianne plays babysitter with Karen, and that's about it for her contribution to this book. 2 chapters of babysitting Karen. They probably could have left her out of this book entirely. Dawn has given up on finding the lake monster, which is fine by me because 2 more chapters of that would have been tedious. She looks for a new mystery to solve, and she learns about the Bayard family. They lived on an island in the middle of the lake over 50 years ago, then they suddenly disappeared. Why did they leave? Probably to get away from this book. Claudia decorates the speedboat like a sea monster. The girls ride in the boat while disguised as tourists for some reason. The audience loves it, and they get the Most Spirited Entry Award. Hooray! There are several chapters where the girls have a sleepover on the abandoned island. They argue if the island is haunted. Marianne wakes up at 2 a.m. and sees something white. It's probably a rock or a cloud or something boring like that, but the girls all start screaming their heads off because it's a ghost! Ah! Dawn asks the girls to help her solve the mystery, and no, just kidding. She goes off by herself and finds a gold locket on the ground. She decides it's a thank you present from the ghosts, who must not be evil ghosts. Yeah! So that ends the mystery. Not really. We don't know why the Bayards left the island. In fact, we didn't even try to solve that mystery. But hey, we got some good scares out of it, so we're gonna pretend things were resolved. David and Michael's friends fight with each other again, and the dog gets lost. I love how everyone is more concerned about the lost dog than they were when Karen was lost. Karen narrates the house building competition, and this reads like a really bad little sister book. Karen is snotty about everything, and she won't stop insulting the boys. Yeah, their house looks bad, but they had to build a house from scratch. Karen already had a house at the start of the competition. All she did was clean it up. Quit acting like you're so much better than they are, Karen. The girls win the competition, of course. Karen has mercy on the boys, and she decides not to collect on the bet, so good for her. Then she and her friends play dress up. At the dance, Stacy's worried Sam will do something awful, so she and Claudia come up with a secret signal, which indicates she needs rescuing. The signal is blinking. I thought this meant blinking several times in a row, but no, it means blinking once. When Stacy blinks normally, Claudia starts freaking out. Stacy thinks slow dancing with Sam is wonderful, and she's in love. She decides to rewrite history by pretending she liked him all along, and she wasn't really annoyed when he threw things at her. Right. Jessie decides to break up with Daniel, even though she's only talked to him, once? She writes a big breakup speech, and Daniel is taken aback. He explains that he has a girlfriend at home, and Jessie was totally misinterpreting the situation. She's embarrassed. After this, everyone cleans up the cabin and goes home. They write this book to show how mediocre, amazing their vacation was. Watson is so impressed, he decides to keep the cabin. The end. Post-book follow-up. I thought this book was pretty awful. You could probably tell from my review I was kind of mean. But yeah, it was awful. A pale imitation of the second super special, which was also girls go on a summer vacation to a lake. I'll get to that in a moment, but first here are some random things I picked up on. Like the corner of page 162. What is that? It lines up perfectly with the edge of the text, so maybe it's a printer aid that they forgot to delete? The book totally glosses over the fact that there is no one at home to babysit for the kids in the neighborhood. The emergency backup members won't be there because Logan has baseball camp and Shannon is going to Lake Erie, which is misspelled. At one point, Stacy gives Dawn an incredibly grateful look. Weird use of the italics. Every chapter starts with a diary entry. Halfway through the book, Christy interrupts other people when they're writing diary entries. That was funny. Final random thing on my list of stuff to note. Christy's mom wears a bikini, which prompts Christy to go on an old people shouldn't dress like that rant. It quickly turns into a rant about how Christy still doesn't wear a bra yet. It's similar to Sam's rant about how he doesn't shave yet. I guess the Thomases hit puberty late. That's the sort of long tangent which appears often in this book. To me, it felt like a transparent excuse to waste pages. The majority of the book felt that way. Like there was no attempt at creating an interesting story or developing characters. It felt like they were just running towards the minimum page limit as fast as possible. A good example is the lake monster story. Dawn worries about it for 10 pages, and then she just stops and nobody cares. It gets dropped, nobody worries about it ever again. Why even bring it up? Part of the problem is that the majority of the girls don't have storylines. Christy has 3 chapters, and the most important thing she does for the story is find a boat. That's all. Claudia spends a chapter wondering how to decorate the boat, and 1 chapter decorating it. That's all she does for this book. All Marianne does in her 2 chapters is babysit Karen. All Mallory does is complain about bugs. So that's 4 out of the 7 girls with weak stories. Jessie's storyline could have been interesting, but there was 180 pages between her 2nd and 3rd chapters. So she sees Daniel at the beginning, meets him soon afterwards, and then she completely drops out of the book until she breaks up with him at the end. It's not a compelling story arc. Dawn's storyline was the major one, or at least the trip to the haunted island had the most chapters dedicated to it. It was a good idea to have a story that, multiple girls chimed in on, but it fell a little flat because Dawn was the only one interested in the mystery. We didn't need to hear about the sleepover from Mallory's point of view. She had nothing to contribute to what was going on. The Sam-Stacy storyline was probably the best. It was neat to have Sam narrate a chapter, and I'm sure fans of the series loved seeing Stacy in love with the guy who won't disappear in the next book. This book probably could have done more in developing their feelings for each other, because as it is, they go from antagonizing each other to major love with very little prompting. It works fine, it just could have worked better, that's all. David Michael's subplot was okay, I suppose. His 2 best friends are fighting, that's interesting, but it's overshadowed by Karen's story of boys versus girls. Karen was super annoying in her 2nd chapter. It was just awful. It was like one of her books condensed for maximum brattiness. Overall, I dislike this book. There is not enough story here for a double-length book, no matter how you slice it. The book has 1 or 2 good moments, like, Sam and Stacy, that was good. But I thought the book was mostly subpar. It feels like it was rushed in order to meet a deadline. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 8, Babysitters at Shadow Lake, a 1 out of 10. The back cover tells us that they'll never grow up. Yeah, I figured that out. They've been in 8th grade for 4 years now.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Anne Martin. The school's performing Peter Pan this year. All the girls are excited, which is weird because in book 53 they trashed Mary Poppins as a stupid play for little kids. Continuity! Jessie is so sure she'll get the lead role, she brags to all her friends that she's gonna play Peter. Her friends warn her not to get overconfident, but can you really blame her for thinking she's better than everyone else? She's gotten the lead in every ballet production she's been in. She learned sign language in about a week, won a gold medal, was on TV, and cured cancer. Wait, no, the last one didn't happen. Still, she pretty much succeeds at everything. Christy narrates the recap chapter, and Dawn narrates as the girls decide what characters they'll audition for. Christy wants to be the dog, because she's weird like that. Stacy wants a small, unimportant role, and Dawn wants to be Princess Tiger Lily. Dawn is best Disney princess, after all. But uh-oh, Babysitter's Club nemesis Cookie Mason also wants to be Tiger Lily. Dawn doesn't want to compete against Cookie, and she considers not auditioning. Although, really, Cookie shouldn't be a problem for Dawn. Whenever the BSC goes up against Cookie, Cookie loses. She's like the opposite of Jessie's success. Stacy narrates the kids' auditions. Karen Brewer wants to be Tinkerbell, because fairy princesses. When the director tells her Tinkerbell isn't a character, Karen throws a huge temper tantrum. Later on, Karen hijacks the script readings to do a Tinkerbell dance. Christy is forced to pick Karen up and take her outside. If only every Karen book would have a scene like that. Jessie narrates middle school auditions. She says Christy and Stacy do well, but Logan doesn't. Dawn is so amazing, she gets a special picture. This is a nice picture, but I'm distracted by the girl on the right. Look at her mouth! She's eating her hair while playing with her hair. Jessie brags about all the great performances she's done in the past, and she does some fancy dancing. The director asks about 10 people to do a second audition, but Jessie isn't one of them. She figures this means she got the lead for sure. Can you say delusional? Sam narrates the high school auditions, and just kidding. The book glosses over those auditions. Who cares about high schoolers? I do want to note that a number of female high schoolers are at the auditions, even though there are no roles for them. Poor high school girls. Cookie narrates when the cast list is posted. She's excited to find out that she's Tiger Lily. Wait, what? Cookie beat Dawn? But that's not... Oh, wait. Dawn got the female lead. That's a much better role. So she beat Cookie after all. Good, I was worried for a moment there. The other parts, well, you know from the cover, but I'll say them anyway. Christy is Peter Pan! Dawn is Wendy, Logan and Jessie are random pirates, Jackie Radowski is Michael, and Karen is Tinkerbell. That's right, the director rewarded Karen's temper tantrum by giving her the role. Ugh. Sam and Stacy are Mr. and Mrs. Darling because they just started dating, and playing married people creates maximum romance drama. There's a picture of the babysitters announcing the roles. I think it's a little weird that one group of kids is standing 10 feet away. And I wonder who that is with Dawn and Claudia. It looks like Marianne, but she's not in this chapter, and she would never be caught wearing that sweater. Maybe Stacy dyed her hair dark or something. Mallory is the apprentice costume designer, which is a nice way of saying she's the chore monkey for the costume department. Claudia is in charge of the scenery, but if you think she's going to do any art in this book, you're wrong. Instead, she narrates an awkward Babysitters Club meeting where all the girls complain they didn't get the roles they tried out for. Jessie more or less tells them to shut up because they tried out for small roles and became the main cast. You all got promotions. Stop complaining. Jessie spends the rest of the meeting grouching at Christy.
Jessie snorted. Oh, be quiet. You sound like a horse, said Christy.
The Babysitters Club. The best friends you'll ever have. Marianne goes to a rehearsal because she's babysitting the Braddocks. All the kids are being kind of wild because they're kids and there's no adult supervision here. Marianne is forced to calm the kids down, and the director is so impressed he makes Marianne the backstage babysitter. Mallory loves the teacher in charge of costume designs. She's so amazing! I want to be just like her when I grow up! But then Mallory is ordered to get everyone's measurements. She can't measure boys' waists. That involves touching them. Mallory dithers around for a chapter instead of doing her job. The main costume designer is not amused. Dawn is shocked to learn that the play doesn't mention the women's movement of 1904. What kind of children's material doesn't contain political references? So she decides to give the play a modern feminist rewrite. That mostly means she refuses to sew Peter Pan's shadow, and she tries to give the boys cooking lessons. The rehearsal goes badly as Dawn changes all the lines and Christy forgets all her lines. Cookie heckles them the entire time, and I find it weird that the director doesn't bother to stop her. You think he might try to silence the person who's interrupting the play after every other line. Logan and the pirates are bored because they have nothing to do. They pretend to have a sword fight, and Logan shouts, "Mutiny!" The director gets mad at Logan and fires him on the spot, even though Cookie was misbehaving way worse than Logan was. It's okay, though, because Logan gets his job back in the next chapter. Cookie hassles Christy some more, and she asks the director for her own personal dressing room. Christy says she has the perfect room for Cookie, a mop closet. Ha ha ha! Christy brags to her friends about her great prank, until Cookie actually does use the closet. Christy swears revenge. Jackie gets a chapter. They're doing all the rehearsals in full costumes, because reasons. Jackie dislikes his costume, and he dislikes pretending to fly. They're not using ropes to make the kids fly in this play, because no way are they giving Karen that much power. Jackie sees the crocodile costume, and he's so scared he starts screaming. I forgot to mention this earlier, Jessie quit the show, because there's no way she's going to be a dumb pirate. The director convinced her to stay on as an assistant choreographer. She teaches the kids how to dance, and she convinces herself that she's doing such a great job, she should be the assistant producer. but when she's not listed as a producer in the playbill, she's disappointed and crosses her name off the cast list. The director tries to explain why Jessie didn't get the lead role. "Your singing is awful, kid!" But his explanation rings hollow, considering that he changed the script just to give a part to Karen Temper Tantrum Brewer. Stacy is furious with her boyfriend Sam because he treats the play like a huge joke. He calls her darling and wife all the time. It was considered cute when Logan and Marianne did that in book 52, but here it's considered annoying. Continuity! Instead of telling Sam how she feels, Stacy expects Sam to read her mind. When he doesn't, she gets even madder. In Sam's chapter, he explains that his friends tease him about Stacy. Like, "Ha, you're dating a middle schooler." Sam wasn't sure what to do, so he got dating advice from Charlie. Bad idea, Sam! Charlie isn't exactly a social butterfly. The high point of his Fridays is waiting outside Claudia's house for a half hour so he can drive Christy home. Charlie recommends that Sam show off how much fun he has with Stacy, hence all the jokes. Sam and Stacy have a serious talk, and she clearly thinks he's an idiot, but she's glad that he still likes her and cares about her feelings. Marianne babysits all the kids, and she gets mad when Mallory interrupts her. But really, why shouldn't Mallory help babysit? There are 10 kids, and club rules state that you need 2 babysitters for more than 6 kids. Besides, there's nothing else for Mallory to do since all the costumes were finished last week. Why is she even showing up at rehearsals then? That's weird. Anyway, Marianne gets mad at Mallory and snaps at her for interrupting. Mallory wanders off trying to find something to do. She discovers that Cookie and Stacy's costumes got mixed up. I have no idea how, because Cookie has her own dressing room. But Mallory takes this as a sign that her job as costume monkey is still very important. She's just as delusional as Jessie. They do a dress rehearsal for the elementary school. Jackie is still scared of the crocodile, but then he throws a rock at it and shouts, "Crockabunga!" The audience loves it, but the adults order him to stop. Claudia narrates what she did the afternoon before the first performance. That's a random time period to talk about. She stays at home, talks to a picture of Mimi, and watches a movie with Stacy. That's all. Thank you for your contribution, Claude. There's a last-minute emergency. The crocodile actor broke his nose, and they need Jessie to replace him. Number 1, the cover totally spoiled this end-of-book plot twist. Number 2, why does a broken nose stop him from performing? His face isn't visible in any of his scenes. Number 3, I love Mallory's pulled-back hairstyle. She should try that more often. The good news is that Jackie likes Jessie, so he's no longer afraid of the crocodile. Cookie tries to psych Christy out, and Christy does forget her first line, but after that she performs perfectly. Christy gets revenge by singing during Cookie's big solo. That way, Cookie's big song is a duet! Ha ha ha! Dawn is nervous because she dislikes being the center of attention. Not according to her last book, Continuity! She doesn't eat at all before the play, and she's worried that her dad isn't here to see her perform. Luckily, her stepfather tapes the play. As for the second and final performance of the play, who cares? The book doesn't mention it. The end. Post-book follow-up. This book has a prologue where Jessie gets a job on the newspaper. She's writing an article on the play, and that's why the book exists. It's notes for Jessie's article. We never get to see the article, so whatever. My main problem with the super specials is that few of the stories are developed because they're only 3 chapters long, and there's a 60 to 90 page gap in between subsequent parts of the storyline. Dawn's subplot is a great example. She narrates the first rehearsal, and her next chapter is during the first performance. That's a huge time gap, and it killed the subplot of Dawn revising the script because the book jumps ahead to the point when she's no longer rehearsing the play. So Dawn's subplot ends up being an 8-page distraction that never gets followed up on, just because of the way the book's laid out. I didn't like it. Logan's subplot was equally unimportant. He's fired and then immediately gets rehired, everyone forgets about it, and he only appears once after that. They could have left that out and the book would have been basically the same. I feel like Claudia was cheated out of a storyline as both of her chapters take place in her house, far removed from the play. She's the scenery designer. Why didn't they do something with that? The weird part is, all the scenery is started and finished in between Claudia's 2 chapters. We never see her work on scenery, so what was the point of making her the scenery designer? Jackie had a gap in between his 2 chapters, but that was handled better. He has 3 different plot points. Both chapters hit on all 3 plot points, instead of dropping one of them because of the time gap, like Dawn's revision and Claudia's scenery. Good job on that count. Good job with Jackie. The Stacy-Sam story was also good because Sam's chapter was right after Stacy's. They immediately resolved the story instead of letting it linger, and it was nice to see the misunderstanding from both people's point of view. Similarly, Marianne and Mallory share a storyline. Mallory always narrates right after Marianne, so there's a decent amount of time spent on it. That was good. I didn't care for the story of Marianne as a babysitter, though. Marianne Babysits has been her story for the last 5 super specials. Give her something else to do. The Cookie Christie competition was humorous, and I especially liked Cookie's chapter. She makes mean remarks about the babysitters, and Jessie interrupts with a rant because Cookie called her a twerp. It was funny. It is a little odd how Cookie goes from a rivalry with Dawn to a rivalry with Christie for no reason at all, but it worked. Jessie's storyline was interesting, although I think it could have used another chapter to go into more detail about her feelings. She's the narrator of this book, so she could have an extra chapter. The book indicates Jessie didn't get the lead role because she's horrible at singing, but nobody's brave enough to say that to her face, so it mostly goes unaddressed. You could say it's a cop-out ending for her to star in the play and have a great time anyway, but I thought it was fine. Karen's subplot is that she's a brat who wants everything to go her way, and it does. Typical Karen storyline. But she didn't narrate any chapters, which makes her more tolerable. While editing this video, I realized I completely forgot about Christie's storyline, which tells you how unmemorable it is. Christie's story is that she forgets some of her lines in the play, and that's it. Considering she's the main character of the play, they could have given her something more to work with, but they didn't. She just has trouble memorizing her lines, that's all. Overall, I liked 6 of the 10 storylines, so the book should get a 6 out of 10. I'm giving it an extra point for having an interesting premise that was fleshed out, and had decent amounts of storyline overlap, making it seem like a large connected story. Except for Claudia and Dawn. And Logan. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 9, starring the Babysitter's Club, a 7 out of 10.
In case you don't remember, Mallory's family goes on vacation to Sea City every year. It's basically a beach boardwalk in New Jersey. This year, Mallory gets to bring her 7 friends, which basically doubles the number of kids for no reason. I feel so bad for her parents. Also her younger siblings, why don't they ever get to take anybody along with them?
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. We start with Christy narrating a BSC meeting. Shannon is there. Shannon sure has been showing up a lot ever since book 61, huh? It's explained that Jessie is going to Sea City with Mallory's family, and Stacy is going with the Bretts. All the others will go there much later on. So, half the Sea City book takes place at home? That's a bad premise for a vacation book. Claudia is in summer school because she failed math. Claudia ends up being the smartest one in summer school, which is good for her ego. She makes friends with all the students. And hey, wait a minute, how is she meeting the students for the first time in the summer? She's in remedial math class with them. Continuity! Everyone goes to the Pike house to watch them pack their suitcases in the car. Fascinating. Then we get 2 chapters of them driving to Sea City. 2 chapters of driving. Again, fascinating. There's another babysitter named Toby. Toby and Stacy dated a few times in book 34. He said that he doesn't want to get tied up with some girl from another state, so he's going to date other people when he gets back home. Stacy's done the exact same thing with all of her vacation boyfriends, but that doesn't stop her from throwing a fit. How could Toby dump me like that? He broke my heart. I never want to see that monster again, ever. So, naturally, Toby is there on the day they first arrive. Mallory can't believe how gorgeous he is. He says he can't believe how much she's changed since book 8, and he randomly smiles at her for the rest of the day.
Could it be? It didn't seem possible. He was so much older. 15 probably. But I liked the way he was making me feel. I'd never felt that way before.
Oh yeah, Mallory has a thing for Stacy's ex-boyfriend! Stacy can't believe that a boy would actually be attracted to Mallory, so she yells at Mal and says it's all a trick. Don't fall for it! Mallory calls Stacy out on being jealous, and the drama is so great, I'm almost willing to overlook the fact that Toby is too old for Mal. Almost willing to overlook it. He's 15, she's 11, it's gross. Marianne and Dawn are putting on a summer camp for all the neighborhood kids. Normally, the entire club would be involved in something like this, but no, it's just the two of them this time. Dawn narrates the first day of camp. The kids mess up an art project, and Elvira the goat hits Jenny Prezioso in the butt. It's kind of hilarious. Marianne narrates the last day of camp, where they have a big sleepover. Dawn makes up a scary story. Even though she knows the story is fake, Marianne is such a wimp, she's too afraid to go to sleep that night. As for Christy, she has a baseball match against Bart, only most of her team is gone for summer vacation. Christy goes door to door to recruit new team members. None of them know how to play the game, and they do silly things like play patty cake and pick flowers. The parents don't seem to care. In fact, one set of parents throws a champagne picnic. I guess the parents in this town would rather get drunk than watch their own kids. Chrissy's team loses 34-1. The only run comes when Charlie hides the ball from the other team. No one really cares about the cheating. I guess the audience is drunk on champagne. Back at Sea City, Margot narrates as she finds a tide pool and shows it off to everyone else. Jessie takes the kids through the downtown area, and they see a sign for a sandcastle competition. The kids are excited until they learn all the other competitors are adult professionals. Claudia and her new friends talk about all the fun things that happened during summer school, like the time Claudia tried to bring a calculator to class, but she accidentally brought a TV remote. Claudia is an idiot. Claudia feels bad when she can't go to a party that one of her new friends is hosting, and honestly, who cares? We're never going to see these characters again. Christy, Marianne, Dawn, Claudia, and Logan come up to Sea City with Mrs. Barrett's boyfriend, Franklin Harris. No, his name is Franklin DeWitt. Continuity. So he brings more babysitters than actual children. How does he fit them all in one car? Logan is a little nervous about meeting Alex, Marianne's first boyfriend. Marianne and Alex went out before she met Logan. But what if she's still interested in him? What if she still loves him? Marianne is extra clingy to Logan when the boys meet, and Logan is pleased to see that he's a lot bigger than Alex is. Logan decides his relationship with Marianne is not in any danger, and they have a fun date on the boardwalk. Stacy is a jerk to Mallory, and everyone else, really. Mallory meets Toby again, and he asks her out on a date. Mallory decides she's in love. Hurricane Bill starts to form on the East Coast. There's a lot of worrying over, will the hurricane come here? Should we evacuate? Is the realtor going to charge us full price if we leave early? The sandcastle competition is canceled due to the hurricane, and Jessie is relieved that the kids will not humiliate themselves now. Of course, the hurricane does hit Sea City. The only way out of town is flooded, so they spend the night in a school gym. That's Stacy in the picture? She looks like Mallory without glasses. Oh, is that why Stacy's ex is into Mallory? They look like twins. Back at home, Karen is excited for the hurricane. Why is there a Karen chapter here? Karen has nothing to do with the story. Whatever. The hurricane comes in at 3 a.m. when everyone's asleep, so we never actually see the hurricane that the book spent 70 pages talking about. Boo. The hurricane makes a minor mess, but no one is injured. Karen helps clean up. Buddy Barrett gets a chapter where he helps clean up, and he decides his mom is cool. At home, Logan becomes insanely jealous of Alex, even though he just decided he has nothing to worry about. Wow, Logan is super fickle. Marianne calls and she says she hasn't seen Alex at all because his family evacuated last week. Logan feels stupid, and he makes it up to Marianne by renting a horse and buggy. I am not joking. Logan gets a horse and buggy to ride Marianne home as an apology. I think a normal person would have pretended they weren't jealous in the first place. That's what Marianne did when she worried about Logan finding a vacation girlfriend in Super Special 3. Either way, I think we can agree that Marianne and Logan are a good couple because they are equally paranoid about each other. Mallory prepares for her date with Toby. She gets Claudia to pick an outfit for her, and Claudia casually mentions the time Mallory and Ben got into a fight over how to use the library catalog. Mallory suddenly remembers, oh yeah, I have an official boyfriend. Oops. Are you serious, book? Mallory conveniently forgets about her boyfriend until the ending? This is dumb. So Mallory decides she loves Ben and she cancels her date with Toby. Now Mallory and Stacy are friends again. Yay, Babysitters Club best friends. The end. Post-book follow-up. It was a great idea to do a Sea City Super Special. The two previous Sea City books were popular with fans, and I gave them both a 6 out of 10. Doing a double-length Sea City story with all the babysitters is a good premise. Sadly, the execution left a lot to be desired, and this is not a good book. The main problem is that too much of the book takes place outside of Sea City. This is especially obvious with Christy and Claudia. Both girls get 3 chapters, and 2 of their chapters take place at home. What are they supposed to do in their 3rd chapter? There's not enough time to start and finish a new storyline, so they delay with pointless things like a BSC meeting, a trip to the movies, and a trip to the circus. It's boring! The hurricane story helps a little since multiple characters can talk about it, but we're still left with a lot of filler. If I was in a worse mood, I might even say all of the chapters at home were filler, because none of them affect the title storyline of the girls visiting Sea City. So let's go through all the stories. Claudia has summer school, and her new friends were mildly interesting. They're not in the book long enough for me to get a sense of their personalities. I think it would have worked better if Claudia was in summer school the whole book, and we got a 3rd chapter to better know her new friends. As it is, we only see them twice. Marianne and Dawn's camp was also mildly interesting. It has the same problem as Claudia. We get the first day of camp and the last day and absolutely nothing in between. Only it's worse because the stepsisters share this storyline. It would have been much better if Marianne got the 2 camp chapters and Dawn got her own storyline. Jesse's storyline is sort of a failure. It's too similar to Christie's. They both have storylines where they help kids who are destined to lose a competition. I think the stories would have been stronger if they were in separate books. If this was any other character, she would learn a lesson about trying to do too much as a super sitter, but this is Jessie, who is perfect, so her problem is resolved without her trying. Margot had the best kid chapter. It was cute. Karen's chapter was totally unnecessary. Buddy's chapter was halfway interesting, but it was 3.5 pages. Far too short to be anything other than a half-hearted transition chapter. Remember, this covers when the hurricane hit and the week after. That only deserves half a chapter? Nothing of real interest happened in all that time. Why even bother making a big deal of the hurricane if you're going to skip over it and nothing interesting happens as a result? Buddy's chapter makes a stab at resolving the Mrs. Barrett storyline. Mrs. Barrett is extremely stressed out during the vacation. Stacy complains about it at the start of the book, and then the whole thing sort of gets forgotten as Stacy moves on to complaining about Mallory. I think they should have handed the Mrs. Barrett is stressed subplot to Dawn. Dawn doesn't have a storyline, and she's worked with the stressed Barretts before. Chrissy's baseball storyline was funny. Logan's story was okay. Reverse the order of his chapters and it'd be great. Because as it is dumb for Logan to be okay about Alex, then worry nonstop about Alex. It makes way more sense if he's worried about Alex, then realizes things are okay. As usual, every chapter starts with a 1 to 2 page postcard. Chapters 3 and 5 had good postcards, but the rest were all unimportant page wasters. They make up over 30 pages. I would have preferred 3 to 4 extra chapters over all the postcards. The best story was the love triangle with Mallory, Stacy, and Toby. Stacy's always a humongous jerk in Sea City, so it works. The pacing is off, though. Toby asks Mallory out. We don't hear her reaction because it's the end of her chapter, and we don't hear Stacy's reaction because her next chapter is hurricane boring. Then Mallory's next chapter is, oh no, I have to break up with Toby. The book lost a major opportunity to milk that drama cow for all it's worth. The love triangle resolution was basically a cop-out. Mallory doesn't remember Ben until the plot demands it, please. Overall, it's a bad super special. I'm not trying to be mean, but the Sea City book should take place in Sea City. This is not complicated. It also should have given all the girls a 3-chapter storyline, like the other super specials did, because most of them have 2 chapters of story and 1 chapter of fluff. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 10, Sea City, Here We Come, a 3 out of 10. This book was scheduled to coincide with the printing of the 100 millionth Babysitters Club book. That is a lot of books. Not only that, but it's the last BSC book that Anne Martin wrote. So it's a super special.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
As the cover shows, all the babysitters have a sleepover at Christie's house. Mallory says she's looking forward to writing her What I Did During Summer Vacation essay.
Claudia sighed. It's really a shame, she said,
What's a shame?
that Mal's such a dork.
Hey, I'm not a dork. Am I?
You brought a notepad to a slumber party so you could take notes for an essay, Mallory. Yes, you're a dork. The girls discuss essay topics. Jessie thinks it'd be interesting to write about your most vivid memory. And so, the babysitters remember. Christy begins with a recap chapter. 100 million books, 100 million recap chapters. The sad part is there is no reason for a recap chapter. The entire book takes place several years ago before the Babysitters Club was founded. We don't need to hear how the Babysitters Club works. It cannot possibly affect the story because it doesn't exist yet. Okay, rant over. Christy remembers being 10 years old when Mom was struggling to raise 4 kids by herself. Christy is impressed by Mom's empowering example. She wants to grow up and be just like her. One day, David Michael's babysitter flakes out. Christy wants to be grown up, so she begs Mom to let her babysit him. Mom says yes, and Christy makes a detailed plan for the entire afternoon. During the sitting job, 5 different women check in on Christy multiple times, just to make sure she's doing okay. I thought this was a little strange. Mom can't find anyone to babysit David Michael this afternoon, but she can find 4 people to stop by and visit? Why didn't Mom ask one of them to babysit? Naturally, Christy's first babysitting job is a success, and a legend is born. Stacy's most vivid memory is getting diabetes. 6th grade starts with her and Lane trying to find a new girl to join their clique. The group has a sleepover with a new student named Allison. Stacy drinks a ton of soda and wets the bed while she's asleep. She has to be taken home in shame. Stacy is soon diagnosed with diabetes. The rest of the school year is a disaster, and she is thrilled when her parents move away from New York. What? Stacy was glad to leave New York? Then why does she complain about missing New York in every single book? Continuity! So, Stacy's story is the prequel to book number 3. 16 years later, Anne Martin will write another Stacy prequel story. Stacy gets more prequels than Star Wars. 6-year-old Claudia is excited when the art teacher gives them homework. They have to draw self-portraits. The instructions are to draw yourself the way you see yourself. Claudia draws the best butterfly picture she can, using up every crayon in the box. She's proud of her picture, but the art teacher gets mad and criticizes her for not following directions. Way to step on kindergartner's dreams, Miss Packett. Claudia runs home crying. Grandma Mimi confronts Miss Packett and explains Claudia was following the rules. She drew herself as a butterfly because she sees herself as a free spirit. Claudia's creative, and Mimi won't stand for teachers punishing her just because she's an individual. Grandma Mimi is so amazing, truly, and that's how Claudia's love affair with art was born. Jessie's most vivid memory is Squirt's birth. Jessie doesn't want to have a baby in the house because they're smelly and noisy, and she's especially upset that she and Becca have to share a room now. Squirt is born premature and he has colic. This is ironic because in book 45, Jessie had no idea what colic was. Continuity! One day, while Mom is asleep, Jessie calms down Squirt by rocking him and singing songs. He finally stops crying and Jessie decides he's not so bad after all. And thus, A babysitting legend is born. Logan's most vivid memory is when he first met Marianne. Aw, how sweet. Of course, he's telling this to Marianne, so there's a 50-50 chance that he's just kissing up to her. Logan feels like his life is over when he moves to Connecticut and starts a new school. He notices Marianne staring at him during lunchtime, so he stops and stares at her when she's walking down the hallway. Oh, she's so gorgeous. He knows instantly that she's special. Logan asks his friends for information about Marianne. He purposely sits by the Babysitters Club at lunch so he can interrupt their conversation and volunteer to help them babysit. So Logan and Marianne's first meeting was a setup? It wasn't a chance meeting after all? Oh, now it seems way less romantic and more creepy on Logan's part. Logan has his first babysitting job with Marianne. Logan constantly worries that he messed things up, and Marianne's gonna hate him now! But she doesn't, she loves him, and thus, another babysitting legend is born. Mallory's favorite author is Amelia Moody. Mallory learns how to send a letter to an author and what type of letter you should write to an author. She also learns you shouldn't be disappointed if it takes a long time, and in most cases, you'll receive a generic form letter. Is it just me, or is this entire segment a long lecture from Anne Martin? It feels like an instruction manual on how to send her letters. Mallory signs her letter as your #1 fan, which would be a great book title. She goes to a book signing by the author. Mallory practices what she's going to say over and over again, but when the time comes, she freezes up and can't say anything. Also, the author doesn't remember her at all. It seems like this would be a huge disappointment for Mallory since she messed up in front of her idol, but no, Mallory's inspired to become an author now. Shannon's parents are having marital issues that will never be mentioned again. A new girl named Sally White goes to their school. Sally's mother is a celebrity, so they have a huge house, they know all sorts of famous people, and she even has her own horse. Sally picks someone from Shannon's group to be her friend. When Sally gets bored with her, she picks another girl, then another. When it's Shannon's turn to be Sally's friend, she has an astronomy club test to study for. Sally is mad that Shannon would rather study than hang out with her, so she ends the friendship after less than a day. Sally is never going to have real friends with that attitude. Too bad she doesn't know the BSC are the best friends you'll ever have. Actually, I noticed some books are being advertised as America's Favorite Girls now. After 100 million books, I guess the Babysitters Club has earned the right to that slogan. Well, thanks to Sally, Shannon decides she hates making friends with new girls, and that's why she was mean to Christy when they first met in Book 11. Dawn remembers her parents' divorce. It starts with her parents fighting over small things. Then Dad goes out with his friends all the time instead of coming home. Mom and Dad yell at each other a lot, and Dad stops coming home for days at a time. For some reason, Mom sleeps on the couch then. I don't get it. If your husband isn't home, how is he making you sleep on the couch? Mom accuses Dad of being a liar, and he leaves for a long time. When he returns, they announce they're getting a divorce because of irreconcilable differences. They don't agree on money or lifestyle or anything. I'm a little confused here because Dawn's mom goes on to marry Marianne's dad, and they are far less compatible on those topics, but they have a really solid marriage. I think something else must be going on here. Dad says that Mom left out the most important thing, but Mom interrupts and we never find out what it is. I've seen multiple guesses as to what happened to break up the marriage. I'm curious why it's not an issue for Dad and Carol's marriage, but that's neither here nor there. Dawn moves to Connecticut with Mom, where they buy a new house and she meets Marianne. Finally, Marianne remembers when she was 8 years old, Dad had to go on a business trip and Marianne didn't want a babysitter. She's really mouthy to Richard here. I mean, yeah, she's 8, but she always claims that her father was super strict and never let her get away with anything. Here, he lets her get away with fighting, backtalk, and he gives her a sleepover. That does not sound like a strict dad. Marianne's babysitter is a mean older woman who refuses to let Marianne have a brownie after school. At the sleepover, Christy decides to prank the babysitter. They put pepper in her salad and tack her shoes to the floor. Mrs. Tate is amused by the tricks, and they have a lot of fun pranking each other. Marianne realizes babysitters are okay. and thus a babysitting legend is born. Oddly enough, Marianne's dad got Mrs. Tate through something called the agency. I had no idea Stony Brook has an agency which provides parents with quality adult babysitters. We are never going to hear about this group again. So let's pretend Christie forced them out of business because she didn't want the competition. The end. Post-book follow-up. I liked this book. The premise was unique, and I liked how all the stories were separated. I've said this in other super special reviews. If Stacy has a 3-chapter story, which is completely unrelated to the rest of the book, there is no good reason to have an 80-page gap in between the different chapters in her story. I much prefer reading Stacy's 3 chapters all at once, with no random separations. Everybody gets 3 chapters, except Claudia, Mallory, Marianne, and Shannon. They only get 2. Claudia's story was heartwarming. I liked seeing Mimi again. I didn't think Christie's story was all that interesting, but it makes sense that she fondly remembers her first babysitting job. Marianne's story was interesting too, although the story was directly copied from book 36. An older woman who's a mean babysitter but becomes nicer after she gets pranked. Yeah, that's a repeat storyline. The funny part is that if a kid tried this on one of the babysitters, the BSC would not put up with it. Poor Mallory's story was a mess. It feels like Anne Martin lecturing fans on how to act towards her, complete with some Mallory humiliation. Jessie's story was an interesting angle showing how she originally hated her brother. I kind of wish we got to see more of her old neighborhood because she mentions it fairly often in her books. Shannon, Logan, Stacy, and Dawn all talk about what they were doing immediately before they joined the Babysitters Club series. That was both a good and a bad idea. It's good because it ties their stories directly into things we already know. It's bad because it's retelling stories we already know. Logan was the worst offender, as he talks about multiple scenes that are pulled directly from his first book. I preferred Stacy's story. Yeah, we already know the general story of how she learned about her diabetes, but this version fleshes out the story a bit more, gives us some more details. I don't like how Lane is a jerk the entire time, though. Lane is supposed to be a good person at this point in time. She doesn't turn evil until book 51, and we have seen her get along with Stacy just fine in the first 50 books. So, continuity! Dawn's story was kind of a letdown for me. Do I want to know why her parents got divorced? Yes. Do we ever find out why? No, we don't. The focus is more on how Dawn feels about the divorce, which is entirely appropriate. I just wish we knew for sure what happened. Shannon's story is the most unique because we've never had her narrate anything before, ever. But like Stacy's story, it's about a new girl moving to school and causing problems with the narrator's friends. I wish Shannon had gotten a 3rd chapter just to flesh her out a bit more, because she's still mostly an unknown character to me, despite showing up in so many books. Does this mean Shannon is the blonde on the cover? I can't tell which one is Stacy and which one is Shannon. I thought one of them was Dawn, so I'm confused. So, I mostly liked all the stories. I only half liked Christie and Mallory, while Dawn left me disappointed and Logan was a repeat. So that's 5 out of the 9 that I liked. Add some points because I half liked the others. Add more points because I 100% approve of the premise and format of this book. And, here's what the math comes out to. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 11, The Babysitters Remember, an 8 out of 10. Dawn's dad is marrying Carol the same weekend Mrs. Barrett marries Mr. DeWitt. It's the weekend before Christmas, and what? There are 2 December weddings? I'm sorry, the premise of this book is more unrealistic than the super special where they won the lottery.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. Dawn is upset about the double wedding because it means some of her friends won't come to California to see her be a bridesmaid. Yeah, I'm pretty sure most of them weren't going to come anyway. 8 round-trip flights across the country is expensive. Dawn and her friends go shopping for a bridesmaid's dress, which is a dumb idea. You shouldn't buy a dress without the bride, otherwise the 2 of you are probably going to end up getting 2 dresses that clash horribly, especially since Carol is wearing a floral print for the wedding. Dawn gets a dress without shoulders, which is too scandalous for the cover artist to draw. Dawn wonders if she should get a second dress for Marianne so they can be matching bridesmaids. Don't bridesmaids normally wear matching dresses? Mrs. Barrett's sister can't make it for the wedding, so she asks Stacy to be a replacement bridesmaid. Why Stacy? I had no idea Mrs. Barrett particularly liked Stacy. I thought Dawn and Marianne were her favorites. It's almost like Mrs. Barrett picked a BSC member at random. Plus, this appears to be a no-kids wedding, so it's strange to have a 13-year-old bridesmaid. It would have made way more sense if she asked one of her mom friends, like Mrs. Pike or Stacy's mom. A store at the mall needs a last-minute replacement for their Santa Claus. Jessie is the only one who's free that weekend, so she gets the job. She worries she can't do it because she's black and female and 11. That's pretty different from Santa, but the person at the store is nice and thinks Jessie will do a great job. Mallory hangs out with her kind of boyfriend Ben, and by the way, there's no Santa Claus. No Santa Claus, he's fake, totally made up. Wow, I thought this was supposed to be a children's book. How many children cried because of Mallory here? Not counting the readers who normally cry whenever Mallory narrates. A huge group of kids show up, and Ben starts singing. They decide to go caroling as a group next week, but then Mrs. Barrett hires Mallory and Shannon to watch the kids at the wedding. Oh no, that's the same time as caroling! Mallory tells Ben they have to cancel caroling, and he is furious. Susie Barrett doesn't want to move, and she gets upset that the new house doesn't have a chimney. How will Santa come? Susie writes a letter to Santa telling him about her address change, but then she gets worried he won't have enough time to read the letter, so Susie whines and screams more than normal. Isn't she precious? Jeff narrates. He thinks writing in Dawn's wedding journal is a waste of time, and he's annoyed because the girls never stop talking. Jeff is easily the best narrator of the series. He complains about doing chores and worries that the housekeeper will be fired after Carol moves in. I haven't mentioned this before, but I am 90% certain that the housekeeper, Mrs. Bruin, was named after the housekeeper, Mrs. Gruen, from the Nancy Drew series. I'm kind of surprised Claudia never mentions it. All of Carol's things are being moved to the house on the day of the wedding. That is terrible timing, truly. There's not enough room in the house for 2 sets of furniture, so they'll have to sell some things. Dad and Carol get into a big fight over who has to sell what, and this marriage is already off to a bad start. There's a We Love Kids Club meeting. As usual, Christy hates the club because they're idiots who don't know how to run a business. I agree with Christy. It's hard to get customers if you're only open whenever you feel like it. Sunny wants to have a surprise party for Dawn, but she hasn't put any thought into it. Christy takes charge and saves the party from being a disaster. Claudia's parents didn't want to spend the money to send her to California, so Dawn's dad made up a fake job for her. Claudia is now being paid to come as a wedding consultant. Claudia buys flowers and completely redoes the catering menu. Did I mention the wedding is tomorrow? Because the wedding is tomorrow! You do not decide the menu and flowers the night before the wedding! Marianne is a little skeptical about a beach wedding because she'll probably get a sunburn and the wind will mess up her hair. So she's already not feeling too good when Dawn tells her she's a bridesmaid. You really should have told Marianne about that sooner, Dawn. Marianne is shocked and nervous about being in front of a large group of strangers. At dinner, Dad and Carol go over the wedding plans. Wait, there's no rehearsal? Normally weddings have rehearsals. It turns out that the title of the book is a lie. There are no bridesmaids in the wedding. Dawn is the maid of honor, and that's it. Dawn is just a jerk who assumed her dad would want his ex-wife's new kid to be his bridesmaid. Not the case. Marianne is upset she's not going to be in the wedding. Dawn points out that's the complete opposite of what she felt 5 pages ago, and Marianne cries. Jessie is super nervous until she starts her Santa job. It turns out she's great with kids. She loves it and doesn't want to leave. Marianne, wow, back to her so soon? Marianne insults Dawn.
Dawn can be very creative when she's not being forgetful and inconsiderate.
Dawn apologizes for being a wicked stepsister, and they become best friends again. Claudia styles everyone's hair, Dad drives like a maniac, and Dawn cries during the entire wedding. At the DeWitt wedding, the children misbehave so badly, I have a hard time believing any of them have been inside a church before. That might explain why the word altar is misspelled in this chapter. Shannon must never go to church either, because she's confused by the aisles and goes down the wrong one accidentally. How many aisles does this church have? Anyway, the toddler misbehaves. Shannon takes him to the basement nursery so he can nap. That means Mallory is stuck with 6 kids for the entire wedding. Shannon is a jerk. Also, there's a basement nursery? If the kids are such monsters, why don't they keep the kids there? And why aren't there any relatives who can watch the kids? That's what happened at my wedding. Stacy has fun with the bridesmaids, and she likes walking down the aisle. The wedding is interrupted when Marnie walks up to her mom, but everyone ends up being okay with it. At the wedding reception, Claudia takes pictures and decorates a Christmas tree. I know she's working with Christy, but the picture makes it look like she's decorating the tree with herself. Speaking of Christy pictures, that cover, oh my gosh, Christy. Mallory feels bad for fighting with Ben. She apologizes, and they decide to go caroling tomorrow. In retrospect, changing the caroling date was an obvious solution they should have thought of immediately. They have lots of fun singing with all the kids, and as a Christmas present, Ben gives Mallory a tape on how to improve her singing. Ben is not winning any boyfriend awards in this book. Jeff is bored by the lack of kids at the wedding reception. I'm not sure why he didn't get to invite his friends, when Dawn got to invite tons of people. Jeff is happy to learn Mrs. Bruin won't be fired, and they open wedding presents. Carol's moving van is robbed. All of her furniture is stolen. Carol confesses she hated the furniture. She only started a fight over the furniture because she didn't want her husband to make any decisions. Again, this marriage is already off to a bad start. The DeWitts hire Logan to move all their furniture for some reason. He's in middle school! Why are you asking him to move pianos? Logan and Susie make a plan so Santa can locate her house. She's going to leave a trail of crumbs, just like Hansel and Gretel. Susie thinks Hansel and Gretel were dumb for using breadcrumbs because birds eat them, so she uses cookie crumbs instead. Birds eat cookie crumbs too, Susie. The party for Dawn is a success and the children are incredibly cute. Carol helps Dawn pass her final exam, and on Christmas Day, Dawn flies back to Connecticut. Everyone is glad that Dawn is back for good. There were 25 books in between this one and the start of her 6-month vacation. That is a super long 6 months. In the epilogue, they realize Stacy's mom is still single, so we can have a 5th wedding in this series if we want. We don't! We don't! The end. Post-book follow-up. After the end, there's a contest to name the new babysitter and her twin sister. The new babysitter? But I thought Dawn was back for good! You can't bring her back just to get rid of her again! That's not fair! Dawn gets 4 chapters to herself. Marianne is the only person with 3 chapters. Everyone else gets 2, except Shannon and Logan. I didn't like the 2-chapter setup. We got way less plot than normal, and it doesn't help that there's a 100-page gap in between the different installments of a story. To be specific, the 2-chapter setup ruined Christy, Claudia, and Stacy's stories for me. Nothing happens with them! You could have cut them out entirely without affecting the book much. Stacy babysits 1 chapter, and with no transition whatsoever, she's suddenly the bridesmaid in the wedding. It would have worked much better if there was an in-between chapter where she met the other bridesmaids, or interacted with the bride. The brides are mostly absent for this book, I noticed. We're told Mrs. Barrett is a bridezilla who freaks out over small problems. That's something interesting we should have seen, right? That would be a cool storyline, much better than babysitting. Oh, I'm so cute walking down the aisle. Claudia's wedding planning was hilarious, but pointless. She doesn't really plan anything. All she does is pick flowers. To make things worse, her 2nd chapter is after the wedding. How is Claudia supposed to plan the wedding after the wedding? Terrible timing there. Move her 2nd chapter up a bit and give her some real wedding planning to do. Christie's chapters were equally pointless. I liked seeing her take charge of the We Love Kids Club. Yeah, that was great! But it was only 2 pages. She has almost nothing to do with the actual party, and the party was overshadowed by the kids anyway. I would keep the party because that was a surprisingly emotional scene, but there's absolutely no reason to tie it to Christie. Jesse and Mallory's stories work just fine with the 2-chapter setup. I give those stories a thumbs up. Jesse's the only one with a story that has nothing to do with the weddings. The scenes with her family were nice, and it was mildly interesting to see the great performer get stage fright. I liked seeing Mallory's relationship with Ben, because we don't see much of him, and their fight felt more realistic than the Dawn-Marianne fight. That fight felt contrived, mainly because Marianne completely flips positions halfway through her first chapter. It would have worked better if that was pushed out into her second chapter. Or if we got to hear Dawn's take on the "you're a bridesmaid, oops, you're not a bridesmaid" drama. As it is now, it's sort of a fake fight that's soon forgotten. Jeff's chapters were the best. He has 2 stories, the one about Mrs. Bruin and the one about Carol's furniture. That's great. It felt like we got more of Jeff than we actually did. Jeff rules. As for Susie, I don't know who thought it would be a good idea to spend 3 chapters on a 5-year-old Santa drama, but it was actually a terrible idea. Logan's chapter was a Susie chapter in disguise, and Shannon's was okay, I guess. Any other babysitter could have narrated that chapter and I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Finally, Dawn. She's super excited for the wedding, and that's basically it. She has no major distinct storyline of her own. I wish the book had given her a storyline with Carol. She's hated Carol for the past 50 books or so. I think that should have been more directly addressed. There's a brief scene where Dawn has conflicted feelings about the wedding. That was surprisingly emotional. I feel like Dawn's emotions, her feelings about her dad and Carol, could have been a storyline on its own, just like when Christie's mom was married. Overall, the book is funny. I guess the wedding theme appeals to young female readers, although we've already had 2 weddings in this series. I liked half of the storylines and the general idea of the book. I just wish there was more meat to the book instead of fluffy wedding stuff that doesn't go into much detail. I give Babysitter's Club Super Special number 12. Here come the bridesmaids, a 5 out of 10. It's appropriate for me to sing the score because there is a lot of singing in this book. Just a ton of singing, at least 6 different songs. Yeah, I know there's a caroling storyline, but still, it was an overload of singing. I don't know why.
All the babysitters are going to Hawaii, except Mallory. Christie's going next month, while Mallory is going never. Poor Mallory.
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. Christie recaps who everyone is, and she gives her friends a going-away present. Babysitter's Club t-shirts! The club's name and phone number is on there, so they can advertise the BSC at all times. This makes no sense, because they're going out of state. If they get any new clients, they'll have to drop them in less than a week. Christie clearly did not think this plan through. Abby has trouble getting up early in the morning, and she still hasn't packed yet. Everyone goes to the airport. As soon as the plane takes off, everyone switches seats. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that. A girl named Sue sits next to Stacy's boyfriend Robert, and he's nice to her. That is so much romance drama, it has to continue for the rest of the book. Very bad move on Robert's part. Does he know how often Stacy gets vacation boyfriends in the super specials? She could easily replace Robert. Marianne and Logan also have relationship drama. Recently, Marianne's friends have complained she spends too much time with Logan. They decide to have a trial separation during the trip. Is it just me, or is that the exact same storyline as Marianne versus Logan? Continuity? I think it's a good idea for Logan to hang out with his friends on the trip. The problem is, he doesn't really have friends outside of the Babysitter's Club. We're told he hangs out with Austin and Trevor, but we never see them.
So the storyline sort of disappears until it's resolved in the last chapter. Jessie wants to make sure every part of their trip is recorded for Mallory's sake. She has a camera and a tape recorder. She writes constantly while a tour guide teaches them all about Hawaii's history. At home, the Preziosos realize Jenny is a super brat. About time. They're trying out a new parenting technique, known as ignore Jenny whenever she throws a tantrum. It's a good strategy, but Mallory makes the mistake of taking Jenny out in public. When Jenny throws a huge tantrum, a random woman criticizes Mallory for being the worst babysitter ever. Claudia visits Pearl Harbor, which was attacked by the Japanese in World War II. Claudia is horrified that her ancestors did something so terrible, and she's not at all comforted by the fact that the Americans retaliated by doing even worse things. Claudia wonders about her grandmother Mimi, who was living in Japan back then. Abby learns Hawaiian words and goes to tacky tourist shops. On the beach, she sees people filming a suntan lotion commercial. When one actress quits, Abby quickly volunteers to be her replacement. She tells the TV people that she's 18. I am surprised they fall for this obvious lie when she is clearly in middle school. Dawn and Jessie visit a volcano. They go to a restaurant where there's a nice rainbow. Thanks for your contribution, Dawn. Christy works at a farm camp where the kids are wild. She and Mallory talk about the situation with Jenny. They agree Mallory did the right thing by following the parents' instructions. That's when the angry woman from the park calls. She's Margaret Wellfleet, and she hates Mallory so much, she calls into Mallory's work to get Mallory fired from the Babysitters Club. What is this woman's problem? Abby films the commercial. It's very simple. All they have to do is play volleyball and look sad at the end when someone doesn't use their product. Somehow, this process takes 3 hours, and Abby gets badly sunburned. Abby dreams of becoming a celebrity, and this gets the Best Drop Subplot Award, because Abby has no more chapters after this. I thought at least she would get to see her commercial, but no, her story ends here at the halfway point of the book. Oddly enough, this is where Stacy's story begins. She's still mad at Robert for being nice to Sue on the flight here. They visit a volcano, and Stacy pushes Robert inside. Just kidding. Stacy remains mad with Robert, even when he mentions New York, which is normally a surefire way to get Stacy's approval. Claudia continues to feel terrible about her Japanese heritage when they go to a memorial cemetery. She tries to avoid being seen by other people. Her bad feelings flare up again when she sees a Japanese temple and when some tourists mistake her for a native Hawaiian. A young boy goes missing. Marianne volunteers to babysit his sisters, and together they find the lost child. The adults are impressed with Marianne. Not for finding the lost child, mind you. They're impressed with her babysitting skills. Because of course that's the important thing here. Marianne gets a job with a local family called the Reynolds. Dawn discovers an abandoned lot on the beach. She's horrified to see the beach is covered with garbage. How could anyone destroy such a lovely spot? She decides to clean it up, and this is literally the same subplot she had in book 93. Continuity. Robert decides he wants to be a Hawaiian cowboy. Okay. He struggles with Stacy because no matter what he says, she gets mad at him. You can't win against her, Robert. You might as well give up now. They go in separate helicopters when taking a ride over a volcano. A storm hits and Stacy's helicopter crashes in the jungle. She and the other kids are completely uninjured because helicopter crashes aren't deadly in the slightest. Come on. They wonder what to do, and I can't help but think this section would have been better with Robert. Imagine Stacy lost in the jungle with her boyfriend during a fight. Much better than her being with random kids she doesn't have any connection with. Mallory has fantasies about telling Margaret off. She goes to the park every day in hopes of running into her. When Mallory does see Margaret again, she chickens out and says nothing. Typical Mallory. As it turns out, Margaret has a young son who is an even bigger brat than Jenny. He screams at Mom about how much he hates her. Mallory resists the urge to gloat, but she does catch Margaret's gaze for a while. Marianne babysits for the Hawaiian family. She's very excited to see another culture firsthand, and she almost realizes how racist she is being right now.
I almost said, a typical Hawaiian family, but I stopped myself. That sounded terrible. I mean, what if someone were visiting me in Stony Brook and said, I've been wanting to meet a typical suburban white family?
Marianne feels stupid to learn that the Hawaiian kids are totally normal Americans. Their grandfather is a World War II veteran. Marianne tricks Claudia into meeting him. Claudia's terrified that he'll hate her, but it turns out he doesn't care Claudia is Japanese. The war was 50 years ago, and nobody has any right to place an entire country's burden on Claudia's shoulders. Besides, he's 6 generations removed from a terrible criminal. If you go back far enough, everyone is related to a murderer at some point. That is slightly terrifying, but Claudia is comforted. Dawn organizes a beach cleanup, everyone has lots of fun, and Dawn lectures the local kids on how they can keep beaches clean forever. She even gives them suggestions on cool fundraisers to support their ecological activism. Luckily for Stacy and the 3 other kids, the helicopter pilot knows the way to civilization. He leads them on a 15-mile hike through the forest, which should take about 6 hours. Stacy complains constantly because her feet hurt. Nobody walks this much in New York. I honestly think Stacy would rather die than do something that's not New York style. She almost does die as she runs low on insulin. She passes out and wakes up in the hospital. So Stacy was unconscious during the helicopter crash and their rescue. Why does it feel like the book is skipping over all the interesting parts of her story? Thanks to her brush with death, Stacy decides to forgive Robert for the crime of talking to another girl. Their relationship goes back to being utterly fantastic, at least until next book. Jesse narrates as the book quickly lists everything else they did on the trip, like go to Luau, visit more historical sites, and surfing. Logan tried surfing and failed miserably. Logan surfing could have been an interesting subplot. Dawn's a surfer, right? She could have tried teaching him how to surf. Sadly, it's the last chapter, so there's no time to get into that. Logan talks to Marianne on the plane ride home. He confesses he hated being apart from her on the trip. She feels the same way, and they agree never to be separated again. In the epilogue, Dawn wants to do another cleanup. Claudia has a serious talk with her parents about their family, and Christy tries to get a sitting job with the Hawaiian family. Because of course she does. The end. Post-book follow-up. Here is the cover of the book. Here is the ebook cover. As you can see, the book was scanned at a low resolution. This is a problem because, like most super specials, there are over 20 pages of the girl's handwriting. The handwriting is hard enough to read without it being tiny and blurry. I struggled to read it, and the Jessie chapters were so bad I eventually stopped trying. Most people like the book's illustrations. I wish they weren't low-res in my copy, because they do look rather good. The premise for the super special is okay. I kinda want to go to Hawaii myself now. As usual, I didn't like the structure of the book. The super special structures are terrible. It does not work to have 10 narrators in a 23-chapter book. That's not enough space to give everyone their own fully fleshed out storyline. This was a problem with super specials before Abby joined the club. Adding her and the boys as narrators just makes things worse, and we're inevitably left with problems, like Abby disappears after chapter 10, and Logan's subplot gets ignored because he doesn't narrate anything until the last chapter. Mallory's story was good. I liked her fantasies of confronting the mean mom, very amusing and in character for her. Christy did not have much of a story. She had a recap chapter, half a chapter dealing with me and Mom, and half a chapter that ties into Little Sister 75. I find it weird that this book and the previous one make a big deal out of the fact that Christy is going to Hawaii next month. Only it ends up being totally irrelevant. Marianne's storyline with Logan was a total failure. It's introduced at the start and ignored until the very end. She should have at least referenced it during her chapters in the middle of the book. Her babysitting local kids was mildly interesting. Claudia's storyline was good and emotional, even if it was difficult to read in certain places. Dawn's story was boring, and made worse by the fact that we've seen her do this before multiple times. Get a new storyline, Dawn! Abby's storyline was somewhat interesting, but I'm disappointed that it went nowhere. Jessie had no storyline. She visits tourist places and writes about them. The others complain Jessie's too focused on documenting things for Mallory. It felt like the book was leading up to a story where Jessie learns a lesson about living in the moment instead of trying to capture everything. But no, she talks like a guidebook for dozens of pages. That's her story. I think Stacy's storylines had wasted potential. Stacy's jealous of Sue, but Sue herself never appears, so that went nowhere. Since Stacy spends most of her time in the jungle away from Robert, she can't really resolve her issues with him. But hey, being stranded in the jungle is pretty exciting. Overall, I liked Claudia and Mallory's storylines. I half liked Marianne, Stacy, and Abby, so 2 points plus 3 half points. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 13, Aloha Babysitters, Aloha score, 3.5 out of 10. In this super special, the Babysitters Club goes all across America.
Did they visit our state?
No, they skip over us.
Figures.
Arglefumph book review. Arglefumph book review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. The premise of the book is kind of dumb. Dawn's father has to drive an RV from New York to California. Christy's stepfather gets his own RV and brags he's taking more people to California. Before you know it, the 3-person trip becomes a 15-person trip. Watson, calm down, dude. It's not a competition. The way they split up the group doesn't make sense. 4 of Christy's family members aren't coming, because these books never let Charlie and Sam do anything interesting when Karen's around. So, one RV has Watson, Christy's mom, Christy's 3 younger siblings, and 3 babysitters. Guess which ones? If you guessed Christy, you guessed wrong. Christy does not go on vacation with her 5 family members. Instead, the Brewers go with Jessie and Mallory, who they barely know. They also pick Abby, which makes sense because Abby's their neighbor. They're familiar with her. I wonder why Abby's sister Anna wasn't invited. Christy, Abby, and Anna should have been the 3 people going along with Christy's family. That would have made far more sense than turning this into an RV competition with strange rules. The destinations are also poorly planned. They're going from South Dakota to San Francisco, which looks like this. Jeff wants to go mountain climbing somewhere. There's plenty of mountain climbing places along the route, but they decide on Yellowstone, which is 2 hours out of the way and doesn't have mountain climbing. So now the route looks like this. But then Stacy decides she wants to visit her New York boyfriend in Seattle, even though he's a New York boyfriend and she can see him in New York anytime she wants. So now the route looks like this. Only they take another 2-hour detour to go through Boise, because Dawn thinks she might want to do something there. So that's 15 extra hours of driving, just so Stacy can flirt with some dude she barely knows. As for the other RV, it mostly visits fictional places, so I don't know how direct their route is. The first stop is Jesse's relatives in New Jersey. Mallory is awkward around them. Jesse starts to worry that Mallory is secretly racist. That's not true. Mallory is awkward and nervous all the time. I thought Jesse knew that.
Stacy narrates as they go to Cleveland. She hates it there, because she hates pretty much anywhere that's not New York. Since Stacy is mad, she doesn't describe the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at all. And she only describes the baseball stadium in the most basic of terms. I could be wrong, but it feels like the author was trying to hide the fact that they've never been to Cleveland. Mallory visits Chincoteague, where her favorite horse book takes place. She's disappointed to learn it has become a tourist attraction. It takes a while, but eventually she sees horses running around. It is so magical. This will clearly be the best moment of Mallory's life. Mallory also meets a know-it-all girl named Liz. Claudia is bored by the Midwest. She decides to write in her vacation journal. By mistake, she picks up Stacy's journal, which says they just visited Detroit. Stacy gets mad because they shouldn't have skipped over Detroit. That could have been a good chapter in this book. Stacy gets mad at Claudia for reading the vacation journal. Even though the girls are all sharing their vacation journals, that's the premise of the book. That's why they have those journals. I don't understand why Stacy is so mad at Claudia for doing exactly what they planned to do. Abby is a big Elvis fan, so they visit his house in Graceland. Abby likes to pretend Elvis is still alive. She and the little kids are shocked when they see Elvis walking around. They secretly follow Elvis to his motel, which is a super creepy thing to do. It turns out he's one of 3 men that are in an Elvis impersonation contest. Marianne's grandmother meets them at the Mall of America, another location that is described vaguely. Marianne is unhappy because she doesn't like going to malls, even though she's done at least a half-dozen shopping trips in this series. Continuity. Marianne is upset because Dawn's dad keeps making mean-spirited jokes about the East Coast, and Marianne's dad. Sounds like Jack is a little insecure about Richard Spear, and why not? Richard is the far superior husband. Marianne stands up for her dad in her next chapter, which is 12 chapters from now, almost at the end of the book. It's typical of Marianne to put off a confrontation until the last minute. Jessie visits a fictional plantation in Mississippi, where her ancestors were slaves. She learns about the horrors of slavery, and she can't believe how bad it was. She's sad to learn there's no information about her relatives, and she'll probably never know who they were. Dawn and Claudia narrate when their RV runs out of gas in the Badlands of South Dakota. Dad leaves them to get more gas. He's gone for hours, and they're terrified they'll be eaten by coyotes. Dad comes back with the police. They're escorted to the Wall Drug Store, because of course the police take them to the closest tourist destination. Claudia buys an old painting in the style of Georgia O'Keeffe. She's shocked when she later learns it's authentic. The other RV gets a 2-chapter story. Abby and Jessie narrate when they visit Watson's college buddy in Oklahoma. There's a tornado warning, and they all hide in the bathroom while the tornado causes mild property damage. Then they go to a rodeo. The first event is calf roping. Everyone thinks that's cruel, so they get up and leave. Jeff narrates in Yellowstone, where a bear shows up at their campsite. He goes mountain climbing and conquers his fear, having a good time. Watson notices they're near the Zuni Reservation in New Mexico. Dawn did a big fundraiser for them in Book 44. In a rather selfish move, the group barges into the private Zuni property in order to check out a plaque that was made in their honor. Karen gets mad because her school wasn't part of the fundraiser, and obviously she wants her own plaque. Karen's kind of a jerk. The school's principal comforts Karen by saying all children are precious. Dawn is upset because she wanted to visit a ghost town, but they haven't found any along their route. That's a lie. They've passed dozens of ghost towns, especially if you're willing to go 2 hours out of your way to go somewhere. Dawn takes them to Buzzard Gulch, which she thinks is abandoned. It ends up being a corny theme park based on the Old West, complete with people pretending to be cowboys. Dawn is embarrassed until she sees her friends are having a lot of fun. Karen wants to go to Four Corners so she can be in 4 states at the same time. She and David Michael get into a stupid argument over it. Dad says they don't have enough time to go to Four Corners, but he gives in once she starts crying. Stacy has trouble. She's supposed to meet Ethan in the coffee shop by the park. She didn't bother to ask which park, because she is so dumb, she thinks Seattle only has one park. So Stacy rushes around the city in a panic, going to every coffee place whose name is similar to the one she's looking for. And by the way, traffic in Seattle is not that good, especially if you're driving an RV that's giant. Eventually, she finds Ethan. It turns out he had to reschedule the date for a couple hours later. He told Stacy's parents, but she didn't get the message in time. This entire problem wouldn't have happened if any of these people had cell phones. Stacy and Ethan have a fun time talking about the trip, and they kiss on the Space Needle. It's so romantic. Stacy ends her fight with Claudia so they can gossip about it. There's a serious chapter at the Grand Canyon. Abby's father planned to take the family there shortly before he died. She hates confronting her sad memories, but she also has good memories of her father. She decides she's glad she came. Christy goes to a baseball game in San Francisco. She sees her father on the big screen and searches the stadium until she finds him. They have a brief, awkward conversation where he shows little interest in her or her brothers. Christy doesn't want to cry in front of her dad, so she runs away before he can introduce her to his new girlfriend. Poor Christy. At the San Diego Zoo, Andrew throws a fit when he thinks the pandas are gone. The group runs into Liz again. She gives a lot of animal facts, and everyone's super mean to her. They make many jokes at her expense. The babysitters are later surprised to learn Liz doesn't like them. Liz thinks they're boring and don't know anything. Whoa! Clearly she's got it backwards. She's the terrible one, not them. They make fun of strangers. That's totally nice and normal. The trip comes to an end at Dawn's California home. They have a party with her California friends, including Jill, which is kind of sad because Jill is going to get kicked out of the group once the California Diaries series starts. There is absolutely no mention of how everyone got back to Connecticut. I'm guessing they flew, but then what happened to Watson's RV? The end. Post-book follow-up. I'm surprised at how much I disliked this book. The author is usually hilarious, but this book only has a handful of jokes. I'm sure I would have loved it if the entire thing was a crazy comedy, called It's a Mad, 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 Mad Babysitters Club. I thought this super special was worse than most. Since every chapter takes place in a different state, it's impossible for there to be any ongoing storylines. It's just a series of unrelated one-chapter episodes. There was some attempt to have 2-chapter storylines, like the Stacy-Claudia fight. The stories that are 1 chapter apart work just fine. The others don't, because there's too large of a gap between the 2 chapters. Liz is the best example. I forgot who she was, because there's 150 pages in between her 2 appearances. Stacy's 2 chapters are 4 and 18, which is also a big gap, but not as bad as Christy, who narrates chapters 2 and 22. That's a 20-chapter gap between her 2 appearances. And poor Claudia doesn't do anything in the second half of the book. Each character got to pick 1 place to visit. Christy picked as many baseball stadiums as possible. That's not 1 place, Christy. That's lots of them. You're a cheater. I didn't care about the stories with Dawn, Stacy, Claudia, or Marianne. Christy and Mallory's stories were fine. Jeff is usually a fun character, but he wasn't good in this book. He and the other 3 kids didn't do much. The book would probably be improved if they were removed from the story entirely, or if Jeff and Karen's chapters were given to Christy and Stacy, because as I explained, those 2 need more chapters. Jessie's chapters on racism were good. I like them. Her other 2 chapters are the zoo and the tornado. Those could have been narrated by anyone. There's no reason to give them to Jessie. I didn't like Abby in Graceland. That story went nowhere. The chapter about her father was good, although I thought it was too similar to the storyline in Abby's biography, which is also about her coming to grips with her father's death. That's twice she's had to deal with this topic. Hopefully this means that, in the future, she'll be able to talk to her supportive friends and family about it. Overall, I didn't like the book, although it is in line with the other super specials. I want the super specials to have big, important stories. This one doesn't. It's random moments from a car trip that don't add up to anything. It's okay as a travelogue, although I suspect the author hasn't been to half of the locations in this book. Even the Jessie and Abby storylines, which I liked, get marked down in my book because those girls also narrated unrelated chapters I didn't like. I give Babysitters Club Super Special number 14, BSC and the USA, a 1 out of 10. The Babysitters Club is going to Europe. After going to Disney World, Vermont, California, New York, Discount Atlantic City, California again, Hawaii, nowhere in particular, and more. Can I just say this series gave me unrealistic expectations about how often I would go on vacation?
Arglefumph Book Review, Arglefumph Book Review.
This book was written by Peter Larangis. The 5 girls on the book's cover are going to London and Paris for a school trip. Jessie screams with excitement when she learns her dance friends from book 115 will be there. They'll be performing the special dance they learned with Jessie. Take a wild guess as to where this story is going. Abby is also excited. She figures she'll get to meet the Queen of England. It's weird that Abby thinks she'll meet the Queen, because their tour group is not going to the palace, and besides, the Queen has more important things to do than hang out with random American tourists. There are 50 students on this trip. Guess how many adults are there? 2. 2 adults for 50 kids. That is not an ideal number of chaperones. One adult is a teacher named Mr. Doherty, who's so excited to be in England that he talks and acts like a buffoon. He tends to abandon the kids and wander off by himself. What a terrible guardian. The other chaperone is Stacy's mom. Stacy is mortified to have her mom there. Stacy's also upset when one of the bad girls flirts with her ex-boyfriend. Stacy gets someone else's suitcase by mistake. Inside is an urn with human ashes. Stacy's terrified she traded suitcases with a murderer. She's even more terrified when she realizes she's going to have to wear her mom's clothes. Ew! Alan Gray acts like a doofus around airport security. The security guards take him away, and everybody gets held up until they give him back. This is why they need more than 2 chaperones. If just one kid has a problem, it holds up the entire group. Their school teams up with a Canadian school. Abby and Jessie make Canadian friends, who we never get to see. We see a lot of Christie's Canadian partner, Michel Dumoulin. He's obnoxious and teases her all the time because they like rival sports teams. Christy instantly hates him. Dawn, Marianne, and Claudia are staying at home to work at a playground camp. There are several continuity issues between this and the previous book. Like, Dawn now says she didn't want to go to France because she's already been there. The camp is no longer a 2-month camp, it's just a week long. We're told Cookie got the job because her mom is running the camp, and I think we're supposed to pretend Janine didn't get turned down when she applied for the job herself. Janine's ex-boyfriend Jerry is the head counselor. He picks Janine to be his partner because who cares about the long, involved application process? They're going to let the teenager give the job to the girl he likes. Jerry makes a joke about Janine and Claudia. Janine gets mad and she starts yelling at Claudia. Mallory meets a family cousin named Gillian Orton. Mallory's impressed to learn Gillian is a novelist. As they say in England, that's ab-fab. Mallory has fun with her relatives, and she's stunned when she sees the family tree. She's descended from the famous writer William Shakespeare. I should probably note this isn't possible. Shakespeare's family line ended 33 years after he died. Nobody is his great-great-great-great-grandchild. Stacy loves shopping in London. even though it sounds exactly the same like shopping in New York City. Stacy learns the suitcase belongs to a World War II veteran. He fought in Normandy on D-Day. The ashes belong to a friend who was there with him. Stacy thinks it's a little weird at first. When Stacy visits the cabinet war room, she realizes how serious the war was, and she decides to meet the veteran. At playground camp, it rains so badly they have to bring all the kids inside. Instead of helping, Cookie makes a dirty joke.
Cookie Mason was sinking to the hallway floor, next to the soda machine. As we passed, she started cracking up. Well, if it isn't the Babysitters Club wet t-shirt contest, not that anyone would notice.
Jessie takes everyone to the dance performance. One of the dancers gets injured, so they ask Jessie to take her place in the performance. Jessie does great, everyone cries, and her dancing is shown on international television. It's basically a dream come true for her. Abby and the babysitters visit Victoria Kent. Abby's bummed out when she sees Victoria has a tiny house, not a giant palace. Victoria says she'll be presenting flowers to the Queen at a gala tomorrow. She picks Abby as her chaperone, so now Abby gets to meet the Queen. It's basically a dream come true for her. Robert narrates a chapter. He alternates between being bummed out and being annoyed when the bad girl won't stop flirting with him. He yells at her for insulting Stacy, and she decides to leave him alone. In Dawn's only chapter, she visits a camp for special needs children. She spends all her time watching Susan Felder from Book 32. Dawn is frightened when Susan uses a hug machine. Mallory struggles with her writing. The group goes to Shakespeare's home and they see a play. Mallory learns Shakespeare's daughter looks like Cousin Jillian. This inspires Mallory to write a time-traveling Shakespeare story. The Shakespeare Publishing Company is so impressed, they offer her a book deal. It's basically a dream come true for her. I'm just kidding. That doesn't really happen. But this book has so many unrealistic fantasies, it would not have been out of place. Christy decides they should see a cricket match, and Stacy decides they should go shopping again. Again, there are 50 kids from the school here. Why does the Babysitters Club get to decide the schedule that everyone else must follow? Christy gets mad at Michelle and deliberately avoids him. She gets even madder when he purposely gets dog slobber on her hand. Abby wonders what she's going to say to the Queen. It turns out she doesn't need to worry. At the event, Victoria and some other girls hold up flowers when the Queen arrives. Abby and everybody else is forced to stand behind a railing a long way away. So I guess the only Queen that Abby will meet is Claudia, Queen of 7th grade. Abby doesn't look where she's going afterwards. She accidentally steps on the foot of that one prince guy who's always with the Queen. Abby doesn't remember his name, which just goes to show that it's weird for Abby to be a big fan of the Queen of England when Abby doesn't even know who the Queen's husband is. Victoria gets Abby an awkward photo of her stepping on the prince's toes, so Abby can always remember how she humiliated herself in England. Janine keeps criticizing Claudia until Claudia snaps. They get into a big fight. Not long after, Claudia sees Janine crying. She asks what's wrong, and I thought that was really nice of Claudia. She really cares about her sister's feelings, even though they just had a big fight. Janine explains Jerry's been terrible to her all week. She apologizes for taking her anger out on Claudia. Jessie is awarded golden dance shoes, and they go to Paris. Stacy goes to Normandy with the veteran, and she watches as he scatters his friend's ashes. Michelle bothers Christy at the Louvre. They argue, and so they get separated from the rest of the group. Since the chaperoning on this middle school trip is terrible, there's no real plan for what to do in case someone gets lost. So Christy and Michelle get to wander around Paris by themselves for 4 hours until they meet up with the others at dinner. Michelle stops being such a pest, and they act like friends as he takes her to various famous places. At playground camp, Janine stands up for herself when Jerry is mean to her. Cookie tries to get paired with Logan for softball, When she sees Logan's not interested, she gets mad and quits the job. The babysitters are surprisingly happy that the camp is falling apart. Mallory's so excited about her story, she doesn't pay much attention to anything else. Jessie convinces Mallory to put her notebook down and start paying attention to the tour guides. I thought this was a little weird because in the Hawaii Super Special, Jessie writes all the time instead of living in the moment, so Jessie's mad at Mallory for doing the exact same thing she did 2 years ago. Abby and Christy go to the Paris sewer system. They get into a fight because Christy likes Michelle, but she's worried he doesn't like her back. Christy feels ridiculous for being afraid to talk to Michelle. He shows up alone in Christy's hotel room, and they kiss while looking at the Eiffel Tower. The end. Post-book follow-up. I have the version of this book with a shiny magenta cover. It's so shiny! The final quarter of the book feels off to me. As soon as the group arrives in Paris, the writing style changes. I think maybe the author was rushing to meet a deadline or something, because we suddenly get a lot of one-sentence paragraphs, and there are 3 chapters which are only 4 pages long. I also noticed the handwritten pages at the start of every chapter are longer in general. They're mostly 2 pages long in this book, whereas in the last Super Special, they were mostly 1 page long. But I will give this book a pass on using handwriting sections to inflate the page count, because this is nowhere near as bad as Super Special 5, which had 3 pages of unnecessary fluff before every chapter. Christy's story was okay. I thought it was weird how her love interest, Michelle, acts exactly the same as Alan Gray. I kind of wish it was Alan Gray who filled that role in the story. You know, Christy could have fallen in love with Alan Gray. Alan was treated as a serious character when he talked about his secret crush in the Valentine mystery, and having Christy kiss Alan would have been one way to handle his character before the Babysitters Club series ends. It's gonna end really soon. This is the last Super Special. I like the story at the Playground group with Claudia and Marianne. I think both of them needed a 3rd chapter to round out the story. I would sacrifice Robert's boring chapter or Jesse's 3rd chapter for that. I might get rid of Dawn's chapter too. It was interesting to see Susan again, but it was quite disconnected from the rest of the book. Stacy's story with the veteran was good. I think it cut into the story about Stacy being embarrassed by her mom. There wasn't enough resolution to that. Stacy also shared the bad girl storyline with Robert. I'm not sure why she got more stories than everyone else. Abby's storyline was fine, if you can get past the fact that she's suddenly best friends with Victoria Kent, and she's suddenly obsessed with the Queen of England. Her story is pretty unrealistic and goes into wish fulfillment fantasy territory, just like Jesse's international dancing debut, and Mallory becoming a Shakespeare. But hey, I thought the stuff was interesting, so I'm not going to complain. Overall, I like the book. Since it's the last Super Special, I'm more willing to overlook its flaws. My main issues are that the book falls flat in the final quarter. The playground camp needed 2 more chapters, and the girls never meet the palace guard like they do on the cover of the book. I give Babysitters Super Special number 15, Babysitter's European Vacation, a 7.5 out of 10.